own. The ancient laboratory buried deep in Atlantis' lower levels had become McKay and Glassman's obsession over the past 48 hours. Chief stood in the doorway watching the two scientists work with the manic intensity of people who understood that billions of lives depended on equations and genetic sequences aligning correctly. The lab was a hybrid nightmare of UNSC equipment, jury-rigged to ancient medical consoles, with Wraith tissue samples suspended in stasis fields that pulsed with sickly green bioluminescence. "Tell me you found something," Chief said, his voice cutting through the ambient hum of equipment. McKay spun from his console, eyes bloodshot and hands trembling from too much coffee and too little sleep. "Define something. If you mean a miracle genetic marker that lets us kill ancient Wraith while sparing modern ones, then no. If you mean a series of increasingly desperate modifications to the retrovirus that might reduce collateral casualties from 100% to maybe 70% of modern Wraith populations, then yes. We found something. 70% casualties among our allies is still genocide," Rodney Glassman added, his own exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. "We've identified genetic drift between ancient and modern. Wraith 10,000 years of evolution has created measurable differences in cellular structure, enzyme production rates, and regenerative capacity. But the pathogen we've developed is still too broad spectrum. It kills Wraith. All Wraith. We can maybe tune it to kill ancient ones faster, but the modern hives will still die. Just slower." Chief moved to the display showing the genetic comparison data. His enhanced mental processing, honed by decades of tactical analysis, translated the scientific notation into strategic reality. They had a weapon that would work, but at a moral cost that made even Spartan conditioning uncomfortable. What if we don't deploy it as an airborne pathogen? Direct injection into the ancient Queen's telepathic network node. Use their collective consciousness against them. The very thing that makes them coordinate perfectly becomes the vector that kills them. Nikkei's fingers froze over his tablet. That's actually not completely insane. The ancient Queens created a collective consciousness by linking their telepathic centers directly. If we could inject the retrovirus into that network junction point, he pulled up new schematics, muttering to himself. The infection would propagate through the ancient Queen's enhanced telepathic bonds, which are stronger and more direct than the standard Wraith network. Modern Wraith use ambient telepathy for coordination. Ancient Queens are literally sharing neural processing. Different transmission vector entirely. Would it work? Chief pressed. In theory, maybe. Probably 65% confidence interval. McKay was typing frantically, now running simulations. But it requires two things we don't have: precise location of the ancient Queen's collective consciousness node and a delivery mechanism that can penetrate whatever defenses they've placed around something that critical to their command structure. "I can handle the delivery," Chief said simply. "Find me the target." Glassman looked up from his own calculations, understanding dawning in his expression. "Chief, if the collective consciousness node is aboard their flagship, you're talking about a boarding action against the most heavily defended vessel in their entire fleet. During the largest space battle Pegasus has ever seen. That's suicide." "Spartans don't plan for suicide missions," Chief replied. "We plan for high casualty probability operations with acceptable risk-reward ratios. If deploying the retrovirus directly into their command node eliminates the ancient threat while preserving our modern Wraith allies. The tactical math supports the operation." McKay had pulled up sensor data from their scout observations of the ancient fleet. "There," he said, highlighting a massive hive ship at the formation's center, easily 6 kilometers in length, dwarfing even the ancient hive they'd destroyed in Part 1. "That's their command vessel. Sensor readings show unusual telepathic energy emanating from a chamber deep in its core structure. If the ancient Queens are maintaining a collective consciousness, that's where the node would be located." Chief studied the tactical display with professional detachment. The flagship was surrounded by a protective screen of 50 other hives, positioned at the formation's heart where concentrated firepower from any angle would be impossible. Reaching it would require penetrating layers of defensive fire that would vaporize conventional assault craft. "I'll need a delivery vehicle capable of reaching that flagship," Chief said. "Recommendations?" A puddle jumper with ancient cloak would be your best option, came Colonel Shepard's voice from the laboratory entrance. The colonel walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee, offering one to McKay, who accepted it with grateful desperation. I've been monitoring your conversation. And before you ask, yes, I'm volunteering to pilot. You need someone with natural ancient gene expression to operate the jumper at combat effectiveness, and I'm the best pilot Atlantis has. Colonel, your command responsibilities, Chief began, can be delegated to Taylor for the duration of the operation, Shepard interrupted. Chief, you've spent 8 months proving you can handle impossible missions. But you can't fly a puddle jumper, operate its weapon systems, and conduct a solo boarding action against thousands of Wraiths simultaneously. You need a pilot. I'm the best you've got. Chief recognized the logic and didn't waste time arguing. Accepted. We'll need a strike team. Minimum personnel for maximum mobility. Recommendations? Ronan, Shepard said immediately. He's fought Wraith longer than anyone, knows their ships, and won't hesitate when things get ugly. Plus, he's got a personal stake. His entire civilization was culled by these ancient bastards. He'll see this through to the end. Agreed. Additional support? Spartan 4 fire team for heavy combat capability, Shepard continued, clearly having thought this through already. Not a full squad. Too many bodies slow us down in close quarters. 3 operators maximum. Commander Palmer if she's willing, plus 2 specialists of her choosing. Chief nodded. A 5-person strike team. Himself, Shepard piloting, Ronan for Wraith expertise, Palmer for Spartan combat support, and 1 additional specialist. Lean, mobile, lethal. I'll brief Palmer. Shepard prepare the jumper and plot an approach vector that minimizes detection during the initial battle chaos. Mackay Glassman finalized the retrovirus modification for direct injection delivery. I need it weaponized and ready for deployment in 20 hours. 20 hours? Mickey's voice climbed an octave. Chief, we're talking about genetic engineering precision that normally takes months of. 20 hours? Doctor, Chief repeated, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiation. The ancient fleet arrives in 52 hours. We need time for approach planning, equipment preparation, and contingency scenarios. You have 20 hours to give me a weapon that kills ancient queens without genociding our allies. I trust you'll find a way. McKay opened his mouth to protest, met Chief's implacable gaze through the golden visor, and deflated slightly. Fine. 20 hours. No promises it'll be perfect, but I'll give you something that won't make us mass murderers, probably. That's all I'm asking. Chief left the laboratory with Shepard following. Once they were in the corridor away from the scientist's earshot, the colonel spoke quietly. Chief, you understand this is still a suicide mission, right? Even if we reach the flagship, even if we successfully deploy the retrovirus, extracting from the center of 200 hive ships while they're dying around us, the math doesn't look good. The math never looks good, Chief replied. I've been running suicide missions since I was 14 years old. I'm still here. The key is refusing to accept that impossible means certain failure. It just means extremely difficult. Shepard laughed, the sound carrying dark humor. You know what, Chief? 8 months ago when you walked out of our Stargate in that armor, I thought you were just another over-armored soldier with more firepower than sense. I was wrong. You're just crazy enough to actually pull this off. Spartans aren't crazy, Colonel. We're optimally adapted for low-probability, high-consequence scenarios. That's just a fancy way of saying crazy. They found Commander Palmer in Atlantis' armory, supervising the distribution of hybrid UNS key ancient weapons to the Spartan contingent. She looked up as they entered, immediately reading the tactical situation from their body language. You've got a plan. A terrible, dangerous plan that's going to get people killed. And you need Spartans for it. Affirmative, Chief confirmed. Strike team insertion into the ancient flagship during the main battle. Objective is direct deployment of modified retrovirus into their collective consciousness node. 5-person team. I need you and 2 specialists. Palmer set down the weapon she'd been inspecting. Let me guess, you want Spartan IVs who are okay with the possibility of not coming back. I want Spartans who understand the mission parameters and can execute under extreme combat conditions against superior numbers with minimal support. Whether they come back is secondary to mission success. Chief, that's every Spartan, Palmer said with grim pride. But for this specific operation, I'm recommending Spartan Thorn and Spartan Tanaka. Thorn's got boarding action experience from Covenant ship Rage. Tanaka's a demolition specialist if we need to blow our way through internal barriers. Both have worked with you before and trust your tactical judgment. Acceptable. Brief them on the operation parameters. We launch in 48 hours, immediately following the ancient fleet's arrival. The main battle will provide cover for our insertion. Palmer's expression showed she understood the full implications. We're going in during the height of the fighting, using the chaos as concealment. That means Atlantis and Infinity will be taking sustained fire with no support from this strike team until we complete the mission. Captain Lasky and the Coalition forces can hold for the time required, Chief said with certainty that came from 8 months watching UNSC and Atlantis personnel integrate into a fighting force that exceeded the sum of its parts. Our mission is eliminating the command structure. Once the Ancient Queen's collective consciousness fails, the remaining hives will lose coordination. Standard Wraith political infighting will fragment their assault. And if the modified Retrovirus doesn't work, if it kills Modern Wraith too? Chief was silent for a moment, the weight of that possibility settling across his shoulders like the Mjolnir armor he'd worn for 3 decades. Then we've committed genocide to save billions. And we live with that choice for whatever time we have left. Palmer nodded slowly. Understood, sir. We'll be ready. As Chief left the armory, he activated his secure comm channel to Captain Lasky aboard Infinity. Captain, need you to coordinate with Atlantis Command on main battle defensive strategy. The strike team will be unavailable for the engagement's first phase. You'll need to hold against the ancient fleet with current resources until we complete our objective. Lasky's response carried the calm certainty of a naval officer who commanded Earth's most powerful warship through situations that should have been impossible. Understood, Chief. How long do you need? Best case, 90 minutes from fleet arrival to Retrovirus deployment. Worst case, we don't make it back, and you re-facing 217 ancient hives without the command structure disruption we re-hoping for. Then I'll make sure Infinity is still flying when you complete your mission, Lasky replied. And Chief, make it count. If you're going into the heart of that fleet, make sure every risk you take is worth the cost. That's the plan, sir. Chief spent the next 18 hours in methodical preparation that Spartans excelled at: equipment checks, tactical simulations, contingency planning for 17 different failure modes. He reviewed the puddle jumper's specifications, memorized the ancient flagship's projected internal layout based on previous hive ship reconnaissance, and ran combat scenarios with Palmer's selected team until every operator could execute the mission profile in their sleep. Ronan joined the planning sessions with the grim enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting 8 months for a chance to strike at the ancient Wraith who destroyed his civilization. I've been inside hives before, the Satadan said, marking tactical points on the holographic layout. The organic architecture is intentionally confusing, designed to disorient boarders. But there are patterns, structural weak points where the biomass is thinner, corridors that lead to critical systems. I can navigate us to the core. What kind of resistance should we expect? Spartan Thorn asked, the young Spartan force studying the layout with tactical precision. Everything they have, Ronan replied flatly. Once we re-detected, and we will be detected, every Wraith warrior between us and the objective will converge on our position. Shock troops, regular warriors, possibly bioweapons we haven't encountered. The Ancient Queens won't let us reach their collective consciousness without a fight that makes every previous engagement look gentle. Good, Spartan Tanaka said, checking her demolition equipment with professional thoroughness. I was worried this would be boring. 20 hours after Chief's deadline, McKay transmitted confirmation. The modified retrovirus was ready. Tuned to exploit genetic markers specific to ancient Wraith biology, designed for direct injection into telepathic network nodes. Projected 92% effectiveness against ancient queens with estimated 15 to 20% collateral casualties among modern Wraith populations. Not perfect. Not clean, but significantly better than extinction for their allies. It's the best we can do with the time and resources available, McKay said over the com, his exhaustion evident even through audio transmission. If you can get this into their collective consciousness node and trigger deployment, the Ancient Queens will die within minutes. Their fleet loses coordination. Modern Wraith survive with acceptable casualties. And we don't have to face the moral weight of acceptable casualties, Chief repeated, the phrase tasting bitter. 15 to 20% of modern Wraith hives meant thousands of deaths among the allies who fought beside humanity for 8 months. Queen Seraph's forces, warriors who'd honored the alliance, but it was better than 100%, better than genocide. Prepare the retrovirus for deployment, Chief ordered. Strike team launches in 30 hours. He found Queen Seraph's hologram waiting in one of Atlantis' observation decks, her image staring out at the stars where her fleet maintained position alongside Infinity and the Coalition forces. She turned as Chief approached, her ancient eyes meeting his visor with something that might have been respect. "You found a way," she said quietly. Dr. McKay transmitted the projections, 15 to 20% casualties among modern hives. "My fleet will lose perhaps 2 hives. 3,000 of my people will die so that the rest may survive." She paused. "It is more than we dared hope for. More mercy than my species has ever shown yours." "It's not mercy," Chief replied. "It's tactical necessity. We need your forces to survive the ancient offensive. Losing some to save the majority is acceptable strategic calculus. You can call it tactics if you prefer, warrior. I call it the first time in 10,000 years that humans and Wraith found a way to fight together without one side planning the other's extinction." Her expression shifted into something alien but readable, resignation mixed with grim determination. "When you deploy that weapon, know that the Wraith who die will die as allies. Their sacrifice will be remembered in our collective memory, and the debt will be honored." "I don't want honor or debt," Chief said. "I want to ensure billions of humans survive the next 72 hours. Then we are aligned in purpose, Master Chief. Strike true. Kill the Ancient Queens. And perhaps this galaxy will finally know peace between our species." She paused. "Or at least a peace that doesn't require one side feeding on the other." The hologram faded, leaving Chief alone with the stars and the approaching storm. 30 hours until the ancient fleet arrived. 30 hours until the largest battle Pegasus Galaxy had ever witnessed. 30 hours until Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 led a 5-person strike team into the heart of 217 enemy capital ships to deploy a biological weapon that would determine the fate of billions. He'd faced worse odds, barely, but he'd faced them. And he was still standing. The ancient Wraith Queens thought they'd planned the perfect assault. They didn't know they were about to face a Spartan who made a career out of turning perfect plans into catastrophic failures. For the enemy, anyway. The ancient Wraith fleet arrived in Lantean space with the terrible majesty of an extinction event made manifest. 217 hive ships dropped from hyperspace simultaneously, their organic hulls blotting out entire sections of starfield as they materialized in perfect coordination. Each vessel was a monument to predatory evolution kilometers of bioengineered death that had survived 10,000 years of hibernation to wait for one final feeding frenzy. Chief stood in Atlantis' gate room watching the tactical display update in real time, each red marker representing enough Wraith warriors to overwhelm a planetary defense force. The ancient fleet had arranged itself in a sphere formation with Lantea at the center, a 3-dimensional encirclement designed to prevent escape and ensure total destruction of the human stronghold that had dared to resist. "Contact in 30 seconds, Chuck announced from the control console, his voice remarkably steady for someone watching an apocalypse arrive on schedule. "All Coalition forces report ready status. Infinity is at battle stations. Modern Wraith Allied fleet is holding position on our flanks. Genii nuclear batteries are armed. Traveler ships are standing by for evacuation support." Shepard stood beside Chief, P90 ready despite the fact that this initial engagement would be fought in vacuum beyond any rifle's range. The Colonel's team, minus Rono, who was already aboard the puddle jumper, had positioned themselves to manage Atlantis' defensive coordination while Chief's strike team executed their infiltration. "You know," Shepard said conversationally. I've fought Wraith for years. Seen culling runs, hive ship battles, faced down queens who thought humans were nothing but cattle. But this, he gestured at the tactical display showing the overwhelming enemy force. This is different. This is what extinction looks like when it arrives on schedule. Then we make sure extinction gets turned away, Chief replied. Captain Lasky, status? Lasky's voice came through the comm with the calm precision of a naval officer who could commanded through worse situations. At least Chief assumed they were worse. It was getting hard to establish baselines for worse when facing 200-plus capital ships. Infinity is ready, Chief. Mac guns loaded with organic disruption rounds. Archer missile batteries hot. Point defense systems tracking over 10,000 dart signatures that just launched from those hives. We'll hold as long as physics allows. Atlantis reports drone weapons ready, McKay added from the chair room. I've got 147 drones left after 8 months of combat operations. Not nearly enough for this many targets, but I'll make every shot count. Shield is at maximum power, but Chief, we're looking at sustained bombardment from over 200 capital ships. Even with the ZPM, the shield won't hold indefinitely. It needs to hold long enough, Chief said. Strike team final equipment check. In the puddle jumper bay, Chief ran through his loadout one final time with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through 3 decades of warfare. MF-5D assault rifle with 6 spare magazines, not enough for sustained combat, but sufficient for the boarding action. M6D Magnum as backup. Combat knife with ancient alloy edge. 4 fragmentation grenades. 2 plasma grenades scavenged from Covenant equipment and modified by Atlantis engineers. And the most critical payload, an injector containing Nikkei's modified retrovirus. Secured in a reinforced case, mag-locked to his armor. Commander Palmer checked her own equipment: assault rifle, energy sword, breaching charges. Spartan's Thorn and Tanaka carried similar loadouts, plus Tanaka's specialized demolition gear. Ronan stood at the puddle jumper's rear hatch with his particle magnum, the Sataden's expression showing the grim satisfaction of someone about to settle a debt 10,000 years in the making. Jumper systems green, Shepard reported from the pilot seat, his hands moving across ancient controls with practiced ease. Cloak is functional, weapons charged, and they plotted an approach vector that should keep us in the ancient fleet's sensor shadow until we close enough to the flagship for final insertion. Ancient fleet is opening fire, Chuck's voice cut through with urgent professionalism. Multiple hives engaging Infinity and Atlantis simultaneously. Counting over 3,000 bioplasma cannons active. Brace for impact. The first barrage hit Atlantis' shield with the force of concentrated stellar output. The entire city shuddered, ancient architecture groaning as energy fields absorbed terawatts of destructive power. Chief's HUD registered the shield percentage dropping 97%, 94-91 each percentage point, representing massive power drain from the ZPM that kept the city alive. Shield holding, McKay reported, though his voice carried the tension of someone watching irreplaceable resources burn away. But at this rate of fire, I'm projecting total shield collapse in 6 to 7 hours. Recommend we don't take 6 to 7 hours to complete whatever miracle you're planning, Chief. Understood. Strike team, board the jumper. We launch in 60 seconds. Chief's team moved with Spartan efficiency, each operator taking positions that maximize the puddle jumper's limited space while maintaining tactical readiness. The ancient vessel was designed for small teams, not armored Spartans, but they made it work through the same adaptation that had carried them through 8 months of Pegasus operations. Outside, the battle escalated into full apocalyptic fury. Infinity's Mac cannons spoke with the voice of human engineering triumph. 1,200-ton slugs accelerating to relativistic velocities and punching through ancient hive armor with kinetic impacts that vaporized organic tissue. Each shot destroyed or crippled the target, but there were so many targets. The ancient Wraith responded with concentrated fire that would have overwhelmed any conventional warship. Bioplasma bolts the size of houses converged on Infinity from dozens of hives simultaneously, hammering the UNSC vessel's shields with sustained bombardment that made previous engagements look restrained. Infinity shields at 78%, Lasky reported, his voice tight. Rotating shield harmonics to distribute damage. Point defense is engaging dart swarms. We're splashing hundreds, but there are thousands more. This is going to get ugly fast. Atlantis' ancient drones launched in a golden swarm. Mikte's mind guiding them through the void with desperate precision. Each drone was a masterwork of ancient engineering self-guiding. Incredibly fast, capable of penetrating organic armor that shrugged off conventional weapons. They struck ancient hives with surgical strikes, targeting weapon systems, propulsion nodes, and structural weak points. Explosions blossomed across the ancient fleet as drones found their marks. One hive lost primary weapons. Another's propulsion failed, leaving it tumbling through space. A third took a drone directly into what sensors identified as a reactor chamber. The resulting detonation tore the vessel apart from within. But McKay had 147 drones against 217 targets. The mathematics were brutally simple. Strike team, launch authorized, Shepard called. Cloak activating. Let's go save the galaxy. The puddle jumper lifted from Atlantis' bay with the smooth grace of ancient engineering, its cloak rendering it invisible to conventional sensors. Shepard threaded through the battlefield with pilot skill that made Chief reassess his earlier evaluation. The colonel wasn't just good, he was exceptional. Dodging bioplasma fire and dart swarms with reflexes enhanced by the ancient gene's neurological improvements. Through the jumper's canopy, Chief watched the battle rage with the detached professionalism of someone cataloging tactical data for future reference. The ancient fleet maintained perfect formation despite losses, their collective consciousness allowing coordination that individual captains couldn't match. Every hive that fell was immediately replaced in the formation by another, the sphere tightening around Lantea like a biological noose. Queen Seraph's Modern Wraith fleet engaged from the flanks, their hives trading fire with ancient vessels in a conflict that transcended politics into pure survival. Modern Wraith technology was inferior to the ancient variant's 10,000 years of stagnation versus active warfare experience. But Seraph's forces fought with desperate cunning, targeting isolated ancient hives and exploiting gaps in their formation. Getting sensor readings on the flagship, Ronan called from the back. It's bigger than the tactical display suggested. That thing is easily 7 kilometers long. Probably the ancient Queen's personal vessel built for commanding entire fleets. Chief pulled up the enhanced scan data. The flagship was indeed massive, a cathedral of organic architecture that made even Infinity look modest by comparison. Its weapons arrays could vaporize smaller vessels with single shots. Its armor showed density readings that suggested conventional fire would barely scratch the surface. And deep in its core, Atlantis' sensors detected the telepathic energy signature that marked the collective consciousness node. Approach vector? Chief asked. There! Shepard highlighted a section of the flagship's lower hull, where weapons coverage showed minimal overlap. It's not undefended, but it's the best insertion point we're going to get. I can put us against the hull, but you'll need to cut through the organic armor to create an entry point. Once inside, you're on your own. I'll maintain position for extraction, but if things go wrong... Understood. If we fail to extract, complete mission by any means necessary. Chief, I'm not leaving you behind. Colonel. Chief's tone made it clear this was operational protocol not subject to debate. If the strike team is compromised, your priority is deploying the retrovirus by alternative means. Ram the jumper into the flagship's core if necessary. The mission succeeds regardless of personnel casualties. Clear? Shepard was silent for 3 seconds. Then, clear, but for the record, I hate that plan. Spartans don't plan to fail, Colonel. We just acknowledge the possibility and ensure mission completion regardless. The puddle jumper approached the flagship through a void filled with weapons, fire, debris, and the tumbling corpses of destroyed vessels. Ancient hives died in spectacular fashion, organic tissue rupturing. Green eye core venting into vacuum, entire kilometers-long vessels breaking apart under concentrated coalition fire. But for every ancient hive destroyed, the survivors adjusted tactics, learned, adapted. They were getting smarter. The collective consciousness processing battlefield data in real time and distributing tactical improvements across all vessels simultaneously. 30 seconds to insertion point, Shepard announced. Chief, how are you planning to breach that hull? It's showing armor density 3 times standard hive specifications. Chief pulled a device from his equipment. Harness one of Tanaka's shaped demolition charges modified with ancient technology to cut through organic materials. Plasma cutter. 30-second burn time should create a breach large enough for personnel insertion. Should? Probability of success is 87% based on material density calculations. And if it doesn't work, then we use the remaining 13%. Ronan laughed from the back, the sound carrying dark approval. I really like how Spartans think. The puddle jumpers settled against the flagship's hull, with barely perceptible contact. Shepard's piloting keeping them stable despite the vessel's movement through space. Chief moved to the rear hatch, the strike team forming up behind him in breach formation. Plasma cutter deployed, Tanaka reported, attaching the device to the hull. 30-second countdown starting now. The ancient modified charge burned with blue-white intensity, organic armor bubbling and sloughing away as superheated plasma carved through biological tissue. The smell that filtered through Chief's suit filtration was indescribable burning flesh mixed with chemical compounds his database could unidentify. 20 seconds. The breach deepened, carving through layers of armor that would have stopped conventional weapons. 15 seconds. Warning alerts flashed on Chief's HUD. The flagship's organic systems had detected the intrusion. Interior biosignatures were mobilizing toward their position. 10 seconds. The plasma cutter punched through, revealing the flagship's interior corridors bathed in bioluminescent green light. 5 seconds. Chief could see Wraith warriors already rushing toward the breach point, their feeding hands extended and weapons charging. Breach complete, Tanaka called. Entry point is hot, we've got incoming. Then we give them a warm welcome, Chief replied, raising his assault rifle. Strike team, execute insertion. Shepard, maintain position for extraction. We'll be back in 90 minutes or not at all. Good hunting, Chief, Shepard said. Chief dropped through the breach into the ancient flagship's corridors, his boots hitting organic flooring with the weight of half a ton of Spartan and Maulier armor. His rifle came up instantly, targeting reticle painting the first Wraith warrior in the corridor. 3-round burst. The warrior's skull exploded in green ichor. Palmer dropped beside him, her energy sword igniting with a snap hiss that would have made any Sanghaili proud. She bisected a charging Wraith before it could close to feeding range. Thorn and Tanaka followed, their assault rifles creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the corridor into a killing field. Ronan came last, his particle magnum speaking with the authority of someone who'd spent 7 years perfecting the art of killing Wraith. Move, Chief ordered. Ronan, navigation. Tanaka, demolitions on structural barriers. Palmer, Thorn, security. I'll handle command targets. Formation, spearhead assault, maximum aggression. 0 prisoners. The strike team advanced into the ancient flagship S corridors with the inexorable momentum of a force that had trained together, fought together, and trusted each other's capabilities absolutely. Behind them, the Battle of Lantea raged with apocalyptic fury. Hundreds of capital ships trading fire in the largest engagement Pegasus Galaxy had witnessed in 10,000 years. Ahead of them, thousands of ancient Wraith warriors mobilized to defend their queen's collective consciousness. And in Chief's equipment harness, the modified Retrovirus waited to either save billions or condemn the strike team as genocidal monsters. 90 minutes to mission completion. The countdown had begun. The ancient flagship's interior was a biological nightmare designed by evolution and malice in equal measure. Chief led the strike team through corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent veins thick as his armored forearm, the walls contracting rhythmically like the interior of a living organism. Because that's exactly what it was. The flagship wasn't a ship with organic components. It was a massive creature that had been grown and shaped into a vessel of war over millennia. Contacts, multiple vectors. Thorn called out, his motion tracker painting threats from 3 corridors simultaneously. 30+ Wraith converging on our position. Corridor defense, pattern delta, Chief ordered, his team instantly shifting into a formation they'd drilled 100 times. Palmer and Thorn took the left approach. Relung covered right, Chief held center with Tanaka providing support fire and watching their rear. The Wraith came in a coordinated rush, not the individual predatory attacks of modern hives but tactical squad movements that spoke to ancient military discipline. They carried organic rifles that spat bioplasma in sustained bursts, using the corridor architecture for cover while their feeding hands stayed protected until close quarters engagement. Chief's assault rifle barked in controlled bursts, each 3-round group dropping a Wraith before its regeneration could compensate. His HUD tracked ammunition expenditure with clinical precision, 30 rounds expended, 5 targets neutralized, acceptable ratio. The organic rifle's plasma bolts splashed against his shields, draining them by incremental percentages that his armor regenerated faster than sustained fire could deplete. Palmer's energy sword carved through 2 Wraith who'd gotten too close, the ancient enhanced blade cauterizing as it cut and preventing the regeneration that made Wraith so difficult to kill permanently. She fought with the brutal efficiency of a Spartan 4, who'd spent 8 months learning that hesitation against regenerating enemies meant death. Ronan's particle magnums spoke with methodical rhythm, each shot placed with the precision of someone who'd made killing Wraith into an art form. "Shock troops incoming!" he shouted, and Chief's motion tracker confirmed 4 massive biosignatures moving through the left corridor with the deliberate advance of heavily armored units. "Grenades flash in frag pattern," Chief ordered, pulling a flashbang and fragmentation grenade simultaneously. The team executed in perfect synchronization. Flashbangs detonated first, the sensory overload disrupting Wraith coordination. Fragmentation grenades followed, their shrapnel tearing through organic tissue faster than regeneration could compensate. The shock troops burst through the explosive aftermath, their augmented bodies showing damage but not slowing. These weren't the same variants they'd encountered in Part 1. These were older, more developed. Their organic armor integrated so completely with their biology that they looked like walking weapons platforms. Chief didn't hesitate. He charged directly at the lead shock trooper with the decisiveness that had made Spartans legendary. The creature swung a massive bioplasma cannon toward him, but Chief was already inside its firing arc. His armored fist drove into the shock trooper's reinforced sternum with enough kinetic force to crack chitin and pulp the organic tissue beneath. The shock trooper staggered, its regeneration struggling against the catastrophic damage. Chief followed up with his combat knife, the ancient alloy blade punching through the creature's skull and scrambling its neural tissue. Wraith could regenerate from most damage, but not when their brains were physically destroyed. Palmer and Thorne engaged the remaining shock troops with combined arms. Tactics Palmer, S-energy sword, creating openings, while Thorne, S-sustained rifle fire, exploited the exposed weak points. Ronan put a particle magnum shot through a shock trooper's feeding hand apparatus. The critical biological structure, too complex to regenerate quickly, then followed with 3 more shots that vaporized the creature's head. "Clear," Tanaka called after dropping the last shock trooper with a plasma grenade that melted through its armor. "But my motion tracker is showing massive biosignature increase throughout the ship." "Chief, they're mobilizing everything they have against us." "Expected," Chief replied, checking his own tactical display. The flagship's internal corridors were flooding with Wraith warriors, hundreds converging on their position from multiple decks. The collective consciousness had identified them as a critical threat and was responding with overwhelming force. "Ronan, shortest route to the core chamber." The Satadin consulted his memory of hive ship architecture, overlaying it with the scanner data Tanaka was collecting. Straight ahead, 200 meters, then down 3 decks through what looks like a vertical access shaft. Problem is, that shaft is a natural choke point. "They'll fortify it, turn it into a killing field. Then we don't give them time to fortify," Chief said. "Tanaka, do you have breaching charges that can collapse sections of corridor behind us? Create barriers that slow pursuit?" "I've got 4 shaped charges that could bring down these organic support structures," Tanaka confirmed. "Won't stop them permanently, but it'll buy us minutes while they dig through. Deploy them on our route. Palmer, Thorne, your rear guard during the vertical descent. Ronan and I will clear the path forward. Move fast, hit hard, accept no delays. The team advanced through the flagship's corridors with the relentless momentum of a force that understood hesitation meant death. They left a trail of destroyed, Wraith behind them warriors who tried to slow the advance and learned that Spartans did unslow for anything short of complete structural collapse. Tanaka's charges detonated in sequence, each one bringing down tons of organic material that sealed corridors and created barriers between the strike team and their pursuers. The flagship shuddered with each detonation, its biological systems registering the damage and attempting to regenerate. But regeneration took time, and time was what the charges were buying. They reached the vertical shaft after 6 minutes of sustained combat, a massive organic tunnel that descended into the flagship's depths like the throat of some immense creature. Bioluminescent tissue lined the walls, pulsing with the ship's life energy, and Chief's sensors detected powerful telepathic emanations from below. "That's it," Ronan confirmed. "The collective consciousness node is down there. I can feel it. The telepathic pressure is intense. It's like standing next to a Wraith Queen, but amplified 1,000 times." Chief looked down the shaft, his HUD calculating descent vectors and threat probabilities. 3 decks below, a node chamber awaited, and between here and there, an unknown number of defenders who would fight with the desperation of protecting their queen's shared mind. "Palmer Thorn, establish overwatch positions," Chief ordered. "Suppressing fire on anything that follows us down. Ronan, Tanaka, with me. We descend fast in loud shock and awe, maximum aggression." "Chief," Palmer said, and there was something in her voice that made him pause. "If you don't make it back, it's been an honor serving with you." "Spartans don't plan for not making it back, Commander," Chief replied. "We plan for completing the mission. Hold this position until we return or until structural failure makes it untenable. Then extract and inform Colonel Shepard mission status." He didn't wait for acknowledgement. Chief stepped off the edge and dropped into the shaft with controlled descent, his Mjolnir's thrusters firing brief bursts to manage the fall. Ronan and Tanaka followed, their less sophisticated equipment making the descent more dangerous, but their experience compensating for technological gaps. The shaft's walls were lined with Wraith warriors clinging to organic handholds, their feeding hands extended and weapons tracking the descending targets. Chief fired as he fell, his assault rifle stitching death up the shaft walls while gravity carried him toward the objective. Wraith screamed and fell, tumbling past him into the depths. 30 meters down. Chief's shields flared as bioplasma fire from below hammered his defenses 60 meters. His ammunition counter hit critical last magazine in the assault rifle, 15 rounds remaining. 80 meters. The telepathic pressure was intensifying. Chief could actually feel it now, a weight against his consciousness that felt like the attention of something vast and ancient focusing on his presence. 90 meters. The shaft opened into a massive chamber, and Chief, a brief glimpse, showed a nightmare of organic architecture surrounding a central structure that pulsed with bioluminescent power. The collective consciousness node dozens of Wraith Queens physically linked through organic neural cables, their bodies integrated into a biological computer that coordinated the entire ancient fleet. Chief hit the chamber floor with a kinetic impact that cracked the organic flooring. His shields had dropped to 43% from sustained fire during descent. His assault rifle was at 7 rounds. And the chamber was filled with Wraith shock troops, at least 30 of the augmented warriors forming a defensive perimeter around the Queen's node. Ronan landed beside him, particle magnum already firing. Tanaka touched down and immediately deployed her remaining demolition charges in a defensive pattern around their landing point. "Chief, we're not going to reach that node," Tanaka said with the blunt assessment of someone who'd run the tactical math. "Too many shock troops, too little ammunition, and I'm betting those Queens have more tricks we haven't seen yet." "Then we adapt," Chief replied, pulling the Retrovirus injector from his harness. The device was designed for close-range deployment. He'd need to physically reach the node and inject the pathogen directly into the organic neural matrix. 20 meters of open ground defended by 30 shock troops who wouldn't die easily. 20 meters between success and failure. Between saving billions and dying in an organic chamber at the heart of an enemy flagship. Chief had crossed worse distances against worse odds. "Covering fire, maximum suppression," he ordered. I'm going for the node. If I fall, one of you completes the injection. Chief, that's suicide, Tanaka started. Spartans don't commit suicide, Chief interrupted, checking the retrovirus injector one final time. The device showed green status. McKay's modification was stable, ready for deployment. We just accomplished missions that other people call impossible. Covering fire in 3, 2, 1, execute. Ronan and Tanaka opened fire with everything they had, their weapons creating a curtain of destructive energy that forced the shock troops to take cover. Chief sprinted across the open ground with augmented speed that turned him into a blur of green armor and lethal purpose. The first shock trooper moved to intercept. Chief didn't slow. He drove his armored shoulder into the creature with the force of a freight train, the impact pulping organic tissue and shattering reinforced bone structure. The shock trooper fell, and Chief was already past it. 10 meters to the node. A bioplasma bolt caught his shields, dropping them to 18%. Another hit, 8%. His shield generator was overheating from sustained damage, couldn't regenerate fast enough. 5 meters. A shock trooper's feeding hand grasped his left arm, a biological siphon trying to drain his life force. Chief felt the horrifying pull of energy being extracted, but his augmented biology fought back, giving him precious seconds. He reversed his grip on the combat knife and drove it through the shock trooper's wrist, severing the feeding appendage. 3 meters. His shields failed completely. The next hit would damage his armor directly, and without shields, a feeding hand could reach his flesh, could drain him to a desiccated corpse in 30 seconds, 1 meter. Chief's hand extended toward the node's organic neural matrix, the retrovirus injector positioned for deployment. The collective consciousness seemed to recognize the threat. Every queen in the node chamber turned their ancient eyes toward him simultaneously, their telepathic scream of denial hitting his mind like a physical blow. Chief triggered the injector. The modified retrovirus penetrated the organic neural matrix and spread through the collective consciousness with the speed of thought. The pathogen was engineered to exploit the very telepathic connections that made the ancient queens so dangerous. Each neural link became a transmission vector, carrying the retrovirus from queen to queen faster than any biological defense could respond. The ancient queen's telepathic scream became something different: agony, realization, and the rage of immortal beings recognizing their own mortality. The collective consciousness that had coordinated 217 hive ships began to fracture as the retrovirus attacked the enzyme that regulated their feeding mechanism and regeneration. Deployment. Chief Air's words cut off as a shock trooper Hess bioplasma cannon caught him square in the chest plate, the impact hurling him backward. His armor's damage alarms shrieked as the blast burned through the outer layer and compromised the underlying systems. Ronan was there instantly, his particle magnum vaporizing the shock trooper's head. Tanaka grabbed Chief's arm and hauled him toward cover as the chamber erupted into chaos. The shock troops weren't retreating, they were losing coordination, their movements becoming erratic as the collective consciousness that had directed them began to fail. Chief status, Tanaka demanded. Chief ran diagnostics while his armor's medical systems assessed damage. Chest plate compromised, minor burns to torso tissue, shield generator offline for at least 30 seconds. But the mission-critical system, his ability to move and fight, remained functional. Operational, Chief confirmed. Retrovirus deployed successfully. We need to extract before. The flagship shuddered violently, and Chief's tactical sense screamed warnings. The retrovirus wasn't just killing the queens, it was killing the ship. The flagship was a living organism as much as a vessel, and with its command consciousness dying, the biological systems that maintained structural integrity were failing. The whole ship is coming apart. Ronan shouted over the groaning of organic architecture under terminal stress. We need to move now. Chief forced himself to his feet, his armor's servos compensating for the damage. Palmer Thorn, extraction authorization. Fall back to the jumper. Copy that, Chief. Palmer's voice came back strained. We've got company up here. Dozens of Wraith warriors trying to reach you, but they're moving erratically. Whatever you did, it's affecting them. The strike team ran for the vertical shaft, fighting through shock troops whose coordination had devolved into individual survival instinct. The retrovirus was spreading through the flagship's Wraith crew via the telepathic network, and Chief could see the effects warriors stumbling, their feeding hands spasming, regeneration failing. They'd succeeded. The weapon was working. But success felt hollow as Chief watched Wraith warriors die from a pathogen he'd deployed. These were enemies, yes, but they were dying in agony from a biological weapon that attacked their most fundamental biology. "Chief, look at this," Tanaka called, gesturing to her scanner. The device was picking up massive disturbances across the ancient fleet's telepathic network. The retrovirus is spreading fleet-wide, all 217 hives. It's using the collective consciousness as a transmission vector. Every queen linked to the network is getting infected, which meant Mickey's projections were coming true. Ancient queens dying across the entire fleet. And modern Wraith hives, the ones carrying 15 to 20% genetic similarity, were getting infected too. Queen Seraph's forces, the allies who'd fought beside humanity for 8 months. They were dying because of a weapon Chief had deployed. The strike team reached the vertical shaft and began their ascent, using organic handholds and Mjolnir thrusters to climb, while the flagship continued its death throes around them. Palmer and Thorn provided covering fire from above, their weapons dropping the few Wraith who still retained enough coordination to pursue. Chief's crackled Shepard's voice cutting through from the puddle jumper. "Chief, whatever you did just changed the entire battle. The ancient fleet is breaking formation, hive ships are going dead in space. Some are colliding with each other, their coordination is completely gone." But he paused. "Chief, the modern Wraith hives are showing distress too. Queen Seraph's forces are broadcasting emergency signals. It's hitting them." "I know, Colonel," Chief replied, hauling himself up the shaft with methodical determination, despite the weight of what he'd done. "Retrovirus is spreading faster than projected. All Wraith connected to the telepathic network are being affected. Modern casualties will exceed Mickey's estimates." "How much higher?" Chief checked Tanaka's scanner data, running projections based on the retrovirus spread rate. The numbers painted a grim picture. 40 to 60% of modern Wraith forces, maybe higher. Queen Seraph's fleet will lose 8 to 12 hives instead of 2 to 3. The comm went silent for 3 seconds. Then Shepard's voice returned, carefully controlled. "Chief, that's genocide. That's exactly what we were trying to avoid." "I know," Chief said quietly. "But it was the only option that gave us any chance of saving Pegasus humanity. The ancient fleet would have killed billions. We saved billions by sacrificing thousands. The mathematics don't make it moral, Colonel. They just make it necessary." The strike team reached the corridor level where Palmer and Thorn were holding position. The 2 Spartans looked battered, armor scored, shields depleted from sustained fighting but operational. Together, the 5 operators ran through corridors that were actively decomposing around them, the flagship's biological systems collapsing as the retrovirus killed the queens who maintained them. They reached the hull breach to find Shepard's puddle jumper exactly where they'd left it, the colonel's piloting, keeping the vessel stable despite the flagship's death throes. The strike team piled through the breach, Ronan dragging Chief when the Spartans' damaged armor slowed him. "Everyone aboard?" Shepard called. "Confirmed," Chief replied. "Extract. Maximum speed." The puddle jumper pulled away from the flagship as the massive vessel began to break apart. 7 kilometers of organic architecture tearing itself into pieces as the collective consciousness that had maintained it failed completely. The sight was terrible and magnificent, a living ship dying in space, its death throes visible, as bioluminescent tissue ruptured and vented atmosphere that glowed with the flagship, fading life energy. Through the jumper's canopy, Chief watched the broader battle. The ancient Wraith fleet was in complete disarray, hive ships dead in space, some colliding with each other in slow-motion catastrophes, others simply drifting as their crews died from the pathogen that Chief had unleashed. But the modern Wraith hives were suffering too. Chief could see Queen Seraph's flagship, its bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically, distress signals broadcasting across multiple frequencies. The queen who'd allied with humanity, who'd fought beside them, who'd offered her people's lives to save the galaxy. She was dying from a weapon he'd deployed. "Chief," Mickey's voice came over the comm, and the scientist sounded stricken. "The retrovirus spread faster than my models predicted. The collective consciousness created a perfect transmission network. What should have taken hours to propagate through the ancient fleet happened in minutes. And because Modern Wraith shared genetic markers with ancient variants. Chief, we just killed 63% of Queen Seraph's allied forces, 12 hives, 28,000 Wraith. Our allies. The numbers hit Chief with the weight of command decisions that couldn't be taken back. 28,000 deaths. Allies who'd honored their agreements, who'd fought beside humanity, who'd trusted that the coalition would find a way to save them. And Chief had killed them with a biological weapon that he'd personally deployed. Mission accomplished, Chief said quietly, and the words tasted like ashes. The puddle jumper limped back toward Atlantis through a battlefield, transformed into a graveyard. Ancient Wraith hive ships drifted as lifeless hulks, their organic systems shut down by the retrovirus that had ravaged through their collective consciousness. Some had collided with others in their death throes, creating debris fields of biological material that tumbled through space in grotesque slow motion. Chief counted 47 ancient hives completely destroyed, another 86 dead but structurally intact, and the remaining 94 showing terminal systems failure. 217 extinction-level threats neutralized in less than 30 minutes. But the cost made victory feel hollow. Atlantis, this is Shepard, the colonel transmitted, his voice carrying exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. Strike team is inbound with mission success. The ancient fleet is neutralized. Requesting immediate medical bay preparation and... He paused, clearly struggling with the next words. And someone needs to contact Queen Seraph's remaining forces. Tell them we're sorry. Understood, Colonel, came Taylor's voice from Atlantis Control. Her tone was carefully neutral, but Chief could hear the weight beneath it. She'd been the one advocating for the Modern Wraith Alliance, the one who'd built diplomatic bridges between species that had been enemies for 10,000 years. Now those bridges were burning because of a weapon Chief had deployed. Through the jumper's canopy, Chief watched Infinity maintaining position above Atlantis. The UNSC warship's hull scored with bioplasma burns but intact. Captain Lasky had kept his promise, held the line while the strike team completed their mission. The ship's Mac guns had gone silent now, no targets remaining that required engagement. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Chief felt no triumph. Chief, Ronan said from the back of the jumper, and the Satadin's voice carried an emotion Chief hadn't heard before, uncertainty. The Wraith I've spent years killing, the ones who called my world and turned me into a runner, they're dead, all of them. The ancient queens who destroyed entire civilizations are gone. I should feel satisfaction, victory. He paused. Why don't I? Because we didn't just kill our enemies, Palmer replied quietly, her Spartan training unable to completely mask the moral weight. We killed our allies too. 63% casualties among modern hives. That's not collateral damage from a military strike. That's genocide with a friendlier name. Chief's tactical mind continued processing data, even as the moral implications settled like lead in his chest. The retrovirus had spread exactly as designed, exploiting the telepathic network to propagate faster than any biological defense could respond. The ancient queen's collective consciousness had made them powerful coordinators, but it had also made them vulnerable to a pathogen that used their greatest strength as a transmission vector. And the modern Wraith, sharing too much genetic similarity with their ancient ancestors, had died alongside the enemies they'd helped humanity fight. Colonel Shepard, Queen Seraph's voice came over the comm, weak and distorted by static that suggested her hive systems were failing. I must speak with the Master Chief before the end. Shepard glanced back at Chief, his expression asking silent permission. Chief nodded. Connecting you now, Your Majesty. The holographic projector in the jumper flickered to life, displaying Queen Seraph's image. The change was horrifying. The proud Wraith Queen who allied with humanity now showed the ravages of the retrovirus. Her pale skin had taken on a sickly grey pallor, her white hair was falling out in patches, and her feeding hand twitched spasmodically as the enzyme that regulated it failed. She was dying, and dying badly. Warrior, she said, her telepathic harmonics distorted and weak. You deployed the weapon. The biological solution. Affirmative, Chief replied, because anything else would have been cowardice. The modified Retrovirus was injected directly into the ancient Queen's collective consciousness node. It spread through the telepathic network faster than projected. The ancient fleet is neutralized, and my fleet dies alongside them. It wasn't an accusation, just acknowledgement of reality. 12 of my 15 hives are dead. The 3 remaining are failing, my people. The Modern Wraith, who chose alliance over endless war, are extinct within the hour. She paused, her ancient eyes meeting Chief's visor. Did you know? When you deployed the weapon, did you know it would kill us? Chief could have lied, could have claimed ignorance, blamed McKay's projections, made excuses that would absolve him of direct responsibility. But Spartans didn't hide from the consequences of their actions. I knew the risk, Chief said. Dr. McKay's models projected 15 to 20% casualties among Modern Wraith. The modified retrovirus was supposed to target ancient genetic markers preferentially. But I knew there was a possibility the spread would exceed projections. I deployed anyway because the alternative was allowing the ancient fleet to kill billions of humans. The tactical mathematics supported deployment despite the risk to allied forces. Queen Seraph was silent for a long moment, her failing biology making each breath a visible struggle. When she spoke, her voice carried something that might have been understanding. You made the choice that commanders must make. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Betray allies to prevent extinction. The mathematics of survival are cruel. That doesn't make them wrong, Palmer said quietly. Just necessary? No, Seraph replied, and there was steel beneath her dying voice. It makes them both, necessary and wrong. The universe cares nothing for our moral comfort, Commander. Only results matter, and the result is that humanity survives while the Wraith pass into extinction. She turned her fading gaze back to Chief. History will judge whether that was justice or genocide. I will not live to see which judgment prevails. Everyone aboard? Shepard called. Confirmed, Chief replied. Extract. Maximum speed. The puddle jumper pulled away from the flagship as the massive vessel began to break apart. 7 kilometers of organic architecture tearing itself into pieces as the collective consciousness that had maintained it failed completely. The sight was terrible and magnificent, a living ship dying in space, its death throes visible, as bioluminescent tissue ruptured and vented atmosphere that glowed with the flagship fading life energy. Through the jumper's canopy, Chief watched the broader battle. The ancient Wraith fleet was in complete disarray, hive ships dead in space, some colliding with each other in slow-motion catastrophes, others simply drifting as their crews died from the pathogen that Chief had unleashed. But the Modern Wraith hives were suffering too. Chief could see Queen Seraph's flagship, its bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically, distress signals broadcasting across multiple frequencies. The Queen who'd allied with humanity, who'd fought beside them, who'd offered her people's lives to save the galaxy. She was dying from a weapon he'd deployed. Chief, Mickey's voice came over the comm, and the scientist sounded stricken. The retrovirus spread faster than my models predicted. The collective consciousness created a perfect transmission network. What should have taken hours to propagate through the ancient fleet happened in minutes. And because Modern Wraith shared genetic markers with ancient variants. Chief, we just killed 63% of Queen Seraph's allied forces, 12 hives, 28,000 Wraith. Our allies. The numbers hit Chief with the weight of command decisions that couldn't be taken back. 28,000 deaths. Allies who'd honored their agreements, who'd fought beside humanity, who'd trusted that the coalition would find a way to save them. And Chief had killed them with a biological weapon that he'd personally deployed. Mission accomplished, Chief said quietly, and the words tasted like ashes. The puddle jumper limped back toward Atlantis through a battlefield, transformed into a graveyard. Ancient Wraith hive ships drifted as lifeless hulks, their organic systems shut down by the retrovirus that had ravaged through their collective consciousness. Some had collided with others in their death throes, creating debris fields of biological material that tumbled through space in grotesque slow motion. Chief counted 47 ancient hives completely destroyed, another 86 dead but structurally intact, and the remaining 94 showing terminal systems failure. 217 extinction-level threats neutralized in less than 30 minutes. But the cost made victory feel hollow. "Atlantis, this is Shepard," the colonel transmitted, his voice carrying exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. "Strike team is inbound with mission success. The ancient fleet is neutralized. Requesting immediate medical bay preparation and..." He paused, clearly struggling with the next words. "And someone needs to contact Queen Seraph's remaining forces. Tell them we're sorry." "Understood, Colonel," came Taylor's voice from Atlantis Control. Her tone was carefully neutral, but Chief could hear the weight beneath it. She'd been the one advocating for the Modern Wraith alliance, the one who'd built diplomatic bridges between species that had been enemies for 10,000 years. Now those bridges were burning because of a weapon Chief had deployed. Through the jumper's canopy, Chief watched Infinity maintaining position above Atlantis. The UNSC warship's hull scored with bioplasma burns but intact. Captain Lasky had kept his promise, held the line while the strike team completed their mission. The ship's Mac guns had gone silent now, no targets remaining that required engagement. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Chief felt no triumph. "Chief," Ronan said from the back of the jumper, and the Satadin's voice carried an emotion Chief hadn't heard before, uncertainty. "The Wraith I've spent years killing, the ones who called my world and turned me into a runner, they're dead. All of them. The ancient queens who destroyed entire civilizations are gone. I should feel satisfaction, victory." He paused. "Why don't I?" "Because we didn't just kill our enemies," Palmer replied quietly, her Spartan training unable to completely mask the moral weight. "We killed our allies too. 63% casualties among modern hives. That's not collateral damage from a military strike. That's genocide with a friendlier name." Chief's tactical mind continued processing data, even as the moral implications settled like lead in his chest. The retrovirus had spread exactly as designed, exploiting the telepathic network to propagate faster than any biological defense could respond. The ancient queen's collective consciousness had made them powerful coordinators, but it had also made them vulnerable to a pathogen that used their greatest strength as a transmission vector. And the modern Wraith, sharing too much genetic similarity with their ancient ancestors, had died alongside the enemies they'd helped humanity fight. "Colonel Shepard," Queen Seraph's voice came over the comm, weak and distorted by static that suggested her hive systems were failing. "I must speak with the Master Chief before the end." Shepard glanced back at Chief, his expression asking silent permission. Chief nodded. "Connecting you now, Your Majesty." The holographic projector in the jumper flickered to life, displaying Queen Seraph's image. The change was horrifying. The proud Wraith Queen who allied with humanity now showed the ravages of the retrovirus. Her pale skin had taken on a sickly grey pallor, her white hair was falling out in patches, and her feeding hand twitched spasmodically as the enzyme that regulated it failed. She was dying, and dying badly. "Warrior," she said, her telepathic harmonics distorted and weak. "You deployed the weapon." "The biological solution." "Affirmative," Chief replied, "because anything else would have been cowardice." The modified retrovirus was injected directly into the ancient queen's collective consciousness node. It spread through the telepathic network faster than projected. "The ancient fleet is neutralized, and my fleet dies alongside them." It wasn't an accusation, just acknowledgement of reality. 12 of my 15 hives are dead. The 3 remaining are failing. My people, the modern Wraith who chose alliance over endless war, are extinct within the hour. She paused, her ancient eyes meeting Chief's visor. "Did you know? When you deployed the weapon, did you know it would kill us?" Chief could have lied. Could have claimed ignorance, blamed Mickey's projections, made excuses that would absolve him of direct responsibility. But Spartans didn't hide from the consequences of their actions. "I knew the risk," Chief said. Dr. Mickey's models projected 15 to 20% casualties among modern Wraith. The modified retrovirus was supposed to target ancient genetic markers preferentially. But I knew there was a possibility the spread would exceed projections. I deployed anyway, because the alternative was allowing the ancient fleet to kill billions of humans. The tactical mathematics supported deployment despite the risk to allied forces. Queen Seraph was silent for a long moment, her failing biology making each breath a visible struggle. When she spoke, her voice carried something that might have been understanding. You made the choice that commanders must make. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Betray allies to prevent extinction. The mathematics of survival are cruel. That doesn't make them wrong, Palmer said quietly. Just necessary? No, Seraph replied, and there was steel beneath her dying voice. It makes them both, necessary and wrong. The universe cares nothing for our moral comfort, Commander. Only results matter, and the result is that humanity survives while the Wraith pass into extinction. She turned her fading gaze back to Chief. History will judge whether that was justice or genocide. I will not live to see which judgment prevails. The cost was just 3 species driven to extinction, the ancient Wraith Queens whose collective consciousness Chief had poisoned, and the modern Wraith who'd made the mistake of allying with humanity only to die from a weapon their allies deployed. Ronan spoke quietly from the back of the jumper. In Sateda, we have a saying, the blade that protects can also betray. You saved the galaxy today, Chief, but you also killed allies. Both things are true. Living with that's the burden of warriors. I know, Chief replied. I've been carrying similar burdens for 30 years. This one's just heavier than most. Will it get easier? Palmer asked, her Spartan 4 training not having prepared her for the moral complexity of genocide as tactical necessity. No, Chief said honestly. It never gets easier. You just get better at carrying the weight. The puddle jumper docked in Atlantis' bay, and Chief stepped out to find Colonel Shepard waiting with the expression of someone who understood exactly what Chief had just done and why it would haunt him forever. The ancient fleet is neutralized, Shepard reported formally. All 217 hives are confirmed destroyed or dead. 0 ancient Wraith survivors detected in Pegasus. The threat is eliminated. He paused. And all modern Wraith forces are gone too, 15 hives. Approximately 35,000 Wraith who allied with us, extinct. Confirmed, Chief replied, because there was nothing else to say. Chief, Mickey's voice came over the comm, and the scientist sounded broken in a way that 8 months of war hadn't managed. I've been running the numbers. If we'd waited, developed a more targeted pathogen, taken another month to refine the genetic markers, I could have made a retrovirus that killed only ancient Wraith. We didn't have to kill Seraph's forces. We just ran out of time. Dr. McKay, Chief interrupted gently. We had 72 hours. You gave me the best weapon you could develop in that timeline. The retrovirus worked as designed. It killed the ancient threat and saved Pegasus. The modern Wraith casualties are tragic, but they don't change the fundamental math. We saved billions by sacrificing thousands. That's victory, even when it feels like failure. But it's genocide, Chief. We committed genocide. Against our allies. I know. I deployed the weapon. I gave the order that killed them. I'll carry that weight. But I do it again, because the alternative was allowing the ancient fleet to kill every human in Pegasus. Sometimes there are no good choices, Doctor. Just terrible ones and worse ones. We chose terrible to prevent worse. The comm went silent. Chief stood in Atlantis' bay, surrounded by people who'd fought beside him for 8 months, and felt the crushing weight of command decisions that couldn't be unmade. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 had saved the galaxy, and he'd never felt more like a monster in his life. The hours following the battle became a blur of damage assessments, casualty reports, and the grim mathematics of victory purchased at costs that couldn't be calculated in purely tactical terms. Chief stood in Infinity's war room alongside Captain Lasky and the Coalition Command Staff. Watching holographic displays update with data that painted the aftermath in stark numbers. Ancient Wraith losses. 217 hive ships destroyed. Estimated 1.2 million Wraith warriors eliminated. 0 survivors detected in Pegasus Galaxy. Threat level. Permanently neutralized. Modern Wraith losses. 15 allied hive ships destroyed by retrovirus deployment. 35,200 Wraith casualties. Entire modern Wraith civilization, extinct in Pegasus Galaxy. Coalition losses, 83 personnel killed in action during the defense. Infinity shield generators operating at 62% capacity. Atlantis' ZPM depleted to 41%. Ancient drone inventory. 17 remaining from original 300 plus. Human population saved from culling. Conservative estimates suggested 4.7 billion across 138 protected worlds, plus uncounted billions on uncontacted planets that would have faced extinction-level culling events. The mathematics supported Chief's decision. The lives saved vastly outnumbered the lives taken. By any objective standard, the operation had been a success that prevented a genocide far worse than the one Chief had committed. But objective standards didn't account for the weight of looking into Queen Seraph's dying eyes and seeing understanding rather than accusation. The Genii representatives are asking when they can resume trade with protected worlds, one of Lasky's officers reported. The travelers want to know if we need their ships for reconstruction efforts. And we're getting reports from dozens of human settlements across the Gate network. They're calling this the Liberation. Apparently, word has spread that the ancient Wraith are gone permanently. Liberation, McKay repeated from his position at a secondary console, and his voice carried bitter irony. They're celebrating because they don't know the cost. Don't know that we murdered 35,000 allies to kill the enemy. To them, this is pure victory. Because for them, it is, Shepard replied quietly. The colonel looked like he hadn't slept in days, his characteristic humor completely absent. Those settlements were facing extinction. Children were going to be culled, entire civilizations erased. We saved them. The fact that we did it through morally questionable means doesn't change the outcome for the billions who get to keep living. Does that make it right? Taylor asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who spent 8 months building diplomatic bridges that Chief Weapon had incinerated. We betrayed our alliance with Queen Seraph. We deployed a biological weapon that killed indiscriminately. We became exactly the kind of threat that we claimed to be fighting against. Chief had remained silent through the discussion, processing the moral arguments with the same analytical precision he applied to tactical problems. But analysis couldn't provide answers when the question itself was fundamentally flawed. It wasn't right, Chief said finally, drawing every eye in the room. What I did, wasn't morally defensible. We committed genocide against a species that had allied with us in good faith. No amount of lives saved justifies the betrayal of that alliance. But, he paused, choosing words carefully. Righteousness is a luxury that commanders can't always afford. We had 72 hours to prevent an extinction event. The options were, deploy an imperfect weapon that killed enemies and allies, or allow billions of humans to die while we developed a perfect solution that would arrive too late to matter. So we chose the lesser evil, Palmer said, understanding in her voice. Killed thousands to save billions. It's still evil, but it's less evil than the alternative. The problem with that logic, McKay interjected, is that it justifies anything. Any atrocity can be rationalized if you just make the threat large enough and the timeline short enough. Where's the line, Chief? When does necessary evil just become evil we willing to commit because it's convenient? Chief had spent 30 years wrestling with similar questions during the Human Covenant War. How many civilian casualties were acceptable to destroy a Covenant staging ground? When did orbital bombardment of occupied cities transition from tactical necessity to war crime? Where was the line between protecting humanity and becoming the monster that humanity needed protection from? I don't know where the line is, Doctor, Chief admitted. I've crossed it before, during the war with the Covenant. Destroyed ships with human prisoners aboard because allowing those ships to reach their destinations would have meant worse casualties. Made calls that killed hundreds to save thousands. Every time I told myself it was necessary. And every time I carried the weight of knowing that necessary didn't mean right. Then why keep doing it? Taylor asked gently. Why continue to make choices that you know will haunt you? Because someone has to, Chief replied simply. Command means accepting responsibility for decisions that don't have good options. If I refuse to deploy the retrovirus because it's morally uncomfortable, Billions of people died because I prioritized my own conscience over their survival. That's not nobility. That's cowardice disguised as ethics. The room fell silent. Captain Lasky moved to the viewport overlooking Lantea's surface, where civilian populations were beginning evacuation drills now that the immediate threat had passed. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who commanded Earth's most powerful warship through impossible situations. The retrovirus deployment will be classified at the highest level, Lasky said. Official records will show that the ancient Wraith fleet was destroyed through conventional military engagement. The modern Wraith casualties will be listed as combat losses during the defense. Nobody outside this room needs to know that we deployed a biological weapon against our allies. You're suggesting we cover it up? Mickey's voice climbed an octave. Classify genocide so we don't have to face the political consequences? I'm suggesting we protect the personnel who made impossible choices under extreme circumstances, Lasky corrected firmly. Chief deployed that weapon on my authorization. The moral weight belongs to command, not to the operators who executed lawful orders. If there's political fallout from this decision, it falls on me and Colonel Shepard. Not on the strike team who risked their lives to save the galaxy. Shepard nodded slowly, agreed. The deployment decision was made at command level. Chief executed the mission parameters as directed. Whatever history's judgment becomes, it judges us, not the soldiers who followed orders. With respect, sirs, Chief said quietly, I'm not a soldier who blindly follows orders. I understood the implications of deploying the retrovirus. I made the tactical assessment that supported deployment. I injected the pathogen into the collective consciousness node. The responsibility is mine as much as yours. Chief, Palmer said, and there was something fierce in her voice. You've spent 30 years taking responsibility for impossible choices. You carried the entire Human Covenant war on your shoulders because somebody had to be the one who made the hard calls. But you don't have to carry this one alone. We all knew what the retrovirus would do. We all agreed to the operation. The guilt gets shared. Rollung, who'd been silent through the entire discussion, finally spoke with the blunt honesty of someone who'd spent 7 years surviving through pragmatic brutality. On Sateda, we had a concept, burden sharing among warriors. When my people faced impossible choices, the warriors who executed those choices didn't carry the weight alone. The community shared it. Because some decisions are too heavy for individual conscience. He looked directly at Chief. You deployed a weapon that saved billions and killed thousands. That decision had to be made. You made it. Now we share the burden, because that's what warriors do for each other. Chief felt something shift in his chest. Not absolution, never that, but a slight lightening of the crushing weight. The retrovirus deployment would haunt him for whatever time he had remaining. But knowing that the people who understood the stakes were willing to share that burden, it didn't make the decision right, but it made carrying the consequences slightly more bearable. There's another consideration, Taylor said, pulling up data on the holographic display. The Gate network is reporting communication attempts from over 40 worlds that were under ancient Wraith threat. They're asking for confirmation that the culling danger is permanently eliminated. They want to know if humanity can finally build civilizations without fear of feeding cycles. Can they? Shepard asked, and the question carried implications beyond simple military assessment. McKay pulled up analysis data. The retrovirus targeted Wraith biology, specifically the enzyme that regulates feeding and regeneration. It's lethal to Wraith, harmless to humans and every other species we've tested, but he highlighted concerning data points. The pathogen is still active in the dead hive's organic material. If that biomass enters planetary ecosystems, if the retrovirus mutates or adapts to new hosts, you're saying we created a biological weapon that could potentially threaten other species, Palmer said, understanding the implications immediately. We solved the Wraith problem by introducing a different problem. Maybe, McKay hedged. Probably not. The retrovirus is highly specialized, and organic material in vacuum degrades quickly. But we're talking about unprecedented biological warfare on a galactic scale. I can't guarantee there won't be unexpected consequences. Add it to the list, Chief said. Monitor the dead hive debris fields. Establish quarantine protocols around any organic material that survives re-entry to populated planets. Track mutation rates in the retrovirus samples we've preserved. If it becomes a threat to other species, we develop countermeasures. Just like that? McKay asked. We potentially unleashed a biological catastrophe, and your solution is monitor and adapt. Doctor, we made our choice 72 hours ago when we authorized retrovirus development, Chief replied. Everything since then has been consequence management. We can't unmake the decision. We can only mitigate the fallout and prepare for secondary effects. Lasky checked incoming reports on his command tablet. I'm getting confirmation from Pegasus-wide sensor networks. 0 Wraith biosignatures detected in any system. The ancient fleet is confirmed extinct. Modern Wraith, also extinct. The retrovirus worked exactly as designed. He paused. We won. Everyone. We saved Pegasus Galaxy from an extinction-level threat. Why does it feel like we lost? Because winning required becoming something we're not proud of, Shepard replied quietly. We're supposed to be the good guys, Tom. We're supposed to protect people, respect alliances, fight honorably. Instead, we deployed biological weapons against allies and covered it up to avoid political consequences. That's not how good guys operate. No, Taylor agreed. It's how survivors operate. And perhaps that's the lesson we must accept. Sometimes survival requires choices that compromise our principles. The question becomes, do we let those compromises define us, or do we use them to inform better choices in the future? Chief considered that question with the analytical precision of someone who spent 3 decades making morally complex decisions. The retrovirus deployment would haunt him, of that he had no doubt. But allowing that haunting to paralyze future decision-making would dishonor the lives saved and the allies who died, trusting that Chief would use their sacrifice to protect others. We move forward, Chief said. We acknowledge what we did, accept the moral weight, and ensure that the galaxy we saved becomes worth the cost of saving it. Queen Seraph asked that her people's sacrifice be remembered. We honor that by making sure Pegasus humanity builds something better than endless cycles of culling and warfare. Speaking of building something better, one of Lasky's officers interrupted. We're getting preliminary reports from the salvage teams examining dead ancient hives. Some of them carried technology we've never encountered, advanced hyperspace components, biological weapon systems, and... Sir, one of them has what looks like a partially functional, slip-space-compatible drive system. Every head in the room turned toward the officer. Lasky's expression shifted from exhausted grief to sharp interest. Explain. The ancient Wraith apparently developed hyperspace technology that operated on principles similar to UNSC slip-space theory. Their organic engineering approach created drives that could potentially interface with Infinity's damaged systems. The officer pulled up technical schematics. Dr. Glassman is reviewing the data now, but preliminary analysis suggests we might be able to repair Infinity's slip-space capability using ancient Wraith components. The implications hit Chief with the force of a Mach round. Infinity could potentially go home. Return to the UNSC, to Earth, to the universe they'd left behind when the dimensional anomaly brought them to Pegasus. 17,000 personnel could see their families again, resume their original mission, leave this galaxy and its moral quagmires behind. How long? Lasky asked, his voice carefully controlled. Months, maybe a year of engineering work. But it's possible, sir. We might actually be able to go home. The war room fell into heavy silence as everyone processed what that meant. Chief watched faces shift through emotions, hope, relief, conflict, guilt. Going home meant abandoning Pegasus Galaxy after saving it. Meant leaving behind the alliances forged in 8 months of warfare. Meant walking away from the consequences of the retrovirus deployment. It meant escape from the burden of what they'd become to survive. Captain, Chief said quietly, before we make decisions about returning to our universe, we need to address the immediate situation in Pegasus. The ancient Wraith are extinct, but the power vacuum they've left will create political instability. Dozens of minor factions will compete for territory and resources. We need to ensure the coalition transitions from wartime alliance to stable governance before Infinity considers leaving. Lasky nodded slowly. Agreed. We save this galaxy. We don't get to just abandon it because going home became convenient. He turned to his staff. Continue analysis of the slipspace compatible components, but make it low priority. Infinity's mission in Pegasus isn't complete. We stay until we're certain our departure won't collapse everything we built. And if that takes years? One officer asked. Then it takes years, Lasky replied with finality. We voted to stay and fight. That commitment doesn't end just because we won the first battle. Chief felt something settle in his chest, not peace, never that, but a sense that despite the moral compromises and terrible costs, they were still trying to do the right thing. Even when right was a concept that had become impossibly complicated. The meeting broke up with assignments distributed for the massive reconstruction and stabilization effort that would follow the war's end. Chief remained in the war room after the others departed, staring at the holographic display showing Pegasus Galaxy with its 217 dead hive markers and 0 active Wraith threats. They'd won, saved billions, eliminated an extinction-level threat, and Chief had never felt less like a hero in his entire life. Chief! Palmer's voice interrupted his thoughts. She'd stayed behind, her Spartan 4 armor still showing scorch marks from the strike team operation. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. Not the good call, not the moral call, but the right one. Is there a difference? Chief asked. I don't know, Palmer admitted. But I hope there is. Because if right and moral are the same thing, then what we did was unforgivable. And I'd like to believe that saving 4.7 billion people counts for something, even when the method was monstrous. Chief didn't have an answer for that. So he did what Spartans did when answers weren't available. He focused on the next mission. Pegasus Galaxy was saved. Now they had to make sure it stayed that way. 48 hours after the Retrovirus deployment, the first cracks in the Coalition's unity began to show. Chief stood in Atlantis' main conference chamber watching representatives from a dozen human civilizations argue with increasing hostility about the power vacuum left by the Wraith's extinction. The Genii wanted to expand their territory into former Wraith feeding grounds. The Travelers claimed salvage rights to dead hive technology. Smaller worlds demanded protection guarantees that Atlantis couldn't provide with its depleted resources. Order! Colonel Shepard called out, his patience clearly wearing thin. We didn't save you all from the ancient Wraith, just so you could tear each other apart fighting over the scraps. With respect, Colonel, the Genii representative replied with barely concealed disdain. Atlantis is in no position to dictate terms. Your drone weapons are depleted. Your 0-point module is at 40% capacity. Meanwhile, the Genii Confederation has nuclear capabilities, ground forces, and the industrial capacity to claim and hold territory. The old order is dead. A new one must be established, and Atlantis will not be the dominant power. Chief watched the power dynamics shift in real time. For 8 months, Atlantis had been the linchpin of the Coalition, the ancient city with superior technology and the moral authority of protecting human worlds. But the desperate alliance forged by existential threat was fracturing now that the threat no longer existed. The Genii make a valid point, another representative added. This one spoke for a coalition of agricultural worlds that had survived through tribute payments to modern Wraith hives. We appreciate Atlantis' protection, but we cannot remain dependent on technology we don't understand and leaders from another galaxy who might leave at any moment. We need to develop our own defensive capabilities. By which you mean building weapons, McKay interjected from his position beside Shepard. Let me guess, you want access to ancient technology, Wraith biological systems, and UNSC manufacturing processes so you can create your own military forces. Never mind that we just saw what happens when advanced weapons proliferate across the galaxy. Dr. McKay, the Traveler representative said coldly, your condescension is noted. But you seem to forget that my people have been surviving in Pegasus for generations while you arrived less than a year ago. We understand this galaxy's realities better than Earth's representatives ever will. Taylor attempted diplomatic intervention, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd been building these relationships for years. We are all grateful that the ancient Wraith threat has been eliminated. But we must work together to ensure that the peace we've won is not squandered through territorial disputes and military buildups. Perhaps if we... Peace? The Genii representative laughed harshly. Taylor, there is no peace. There is only the temporary absence of the Wraith. Do you truly believe that Pegasus will remain stable just because one threat is gone? The Goa'uld in your home galaxy learned that lesson: eliminate one system lord and 3 more rise to claim the territory. We must be ready. Chief had heard enough. He stepped forward, his 7-foot armored form immediately drawing attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who spent 30 years managing post-war reconstruction in a galaxy far from here. You're right, Chief said simply, and the representatives fell silent in surprise. The Wraith's elimination has created a power vacuum. Nature abhors vacuums, something will fill it. The question is whether that something will be cooperative governance or destructive competition. He gestured to the holographic star map showing Pegasus. The coalition has a choice. Fragment into competing factions that waste resources on territorial disputes, or establish a unified framework for resource sharing, mutual defense, and technological development. Easy for you to say, the Genii representative countered. The UNSC has Infinity, the most powerful warship in the galaxy. Of course you advocate for unified frameworks when you control the dominant military asset. We control it today, Chief replied. But Infinity requires maintenance, ammunition, and personnel that we can only sustain through cooperation with Pegasus civilizations. Our fusion reactors need raw materials you mine. Our manufacturing systems need components you produce. Our crew needs food you grow. He paused, letting the implications settle. Infinity isn't a weapon pointed at Pegasus. It's an asset that only functions through mutual cooperation. You're not dependent on us. We're interdependent with each other. Captain Lasky's hologram materialized beside Chief, the UNSC officer clearly having been monitoring the negotiations. Master Chief is correct. Infinity's command staff has been reviewing our long-term sustainability in Pegasus. Without resupply from Earth, we're dependent on local manufacturing and resource extraction. We're proposing a formal technology sharing agreement. UNSC manufacturing processes and ancient scientific knowledge in exchange for raw materials, agricultural products, and industrial cooperation. Technology sharing, the traveler representative repeated skeptically. You would give us access to UNSC and ancient technology freely? Forgive my suspicion, Captain, but that sounds too generous to be genuine. It's not generosity, Lasky corrected. It's pragmatic self-interest. Infinity's crew is 17,000 people. Pegasus contains billions. We can either hoard our technological advantages and watch your civilizations develop them independently, likely through reverse engineering, wreckage, or espionage, or we can share controlled access in exchange for stable partnerships. The second option serves everyone's interests better. Chief watched the representatives process this proposal. It was a gamble offering advanced technology, meant accepting that some civilizations would use it for military buildups or territorial expansion. But the alternative was worse. Fractured development where everyone pursued weapons independently with no coordination or safety protocols. What kind of controls are we discussing? One of the smaller world representatives asked cautiously. Would this be Atlantis dictating terms or genuine partnership? Partnership, Shepard said firmly. We're proposing a Pegasus Council representatives from major civilizations, rotating leadership and consensus-based decision-making. Atlantis and Infinity would be members, not rulers. Technology sharing would be managed collectively, with safety protocols established by the Council, rather than imposed by us. And enforcement? The Genii representative pressed. What happens when a member world violates the agreements? Does Infinity show up and bombard them into compliance? No, Chief replied. Enforcement is economic and diplomatic trade embargoes, technology access revocation, isolation from the cooperative framework. Military force is reserved for existential threats to the Council itself, and requires unanimous vote minus the accused party. McKay was typing frantically on his tablet, clearly running calculations. I'm modeling the proposed framework against historical examples from Earth and what little we know about ancient governance. The stability projections are actually not terrible. 73% probability of maintaining cohesion for at least 5 years if all major civilizations participate. That's better than I expected. 5 years? The traveler representative said. And after that? After that, UL have developed enough shared infrastructure and economic interdependence that breaking the framework becomes too costly to consider, Lasky explained. It's the same principle that created the UNSC and our universe. Individual colonies realized they were stronger together than separately. We re-offering Pegasus a chance to learn that lesson without the centuries of warfare it took humanity back home. The conference chamber fell into heavy silence as representatives considered the proposal. Chief could see the calculations happening behind their eyes, weighing the benefits of advanced technology against the loss of complete autonomy, measuring the value of stability against the appeal of independent expansion. Finally, the Genii representative spoke. The Confederation will agree to participate in a Pegasus Council with conditions. First, all technology sharing must be reciprocal. If you get our resources, we get equal access to UNSC and ancient knowledge. Second, Council decisions require actual consensus, not simple majority where Atlantis and its allies can outvote others. Third, Infinity's military capability is placed under Council authority, not UNSC command. Absolutely not, Lasky replied immediately. Infinity remains under UNSC command. We'll participate in Council defense coordination, but I'm not giving other civilizations operational authority over my ship. Then the Genii declined participation, the representative said flatly. We will not join a cooperative framework where one member maintains overwhelming military superiority outside collective control. That's not partnership. That's hegemony with prettier language. Chief saw the negotiations starting to collapse. The Genii had a point asking civilizations to trust Infinity's benevolence, while keeping it outside Council authority created exactly the power imbalance that would breed resentment and eventual conflict. Compromise proposal, Chief said before the fragile detente could shatter completely. Infinity remains under UNSC operational command for routine operations and internal ship matters. But any use of Infinity's weapons systems against Pegasus targets requires advanced Council approval, except in cases of immediate self-defense or response to existential threats. Captain Lasky retains tactical command, but strategic deployment is subject to Council oversight. Lasky's hologram turned toward Chief, and for a moment the captain looked like he wanted to object. But he was experienced enough to recognize when flexibility serves strategic interests better than rigid positions. Acceptable with clarification. Existential threats includes any force that threatens multiple Council member worlds simultaneously. I won't wait for Council votes while planets are being invaded. Agreed, the Genii representative said after a pause. With that modification, the Confederation will participate. One by one, the other representatives agreed to the framework. Not with enthusiasm, this was pragmatic cooperation. Not idealistic unity, but with enough commitment to create a foundation for post-war governance. After the meeting concluded and the representatives departed, Shepard cornered Chief in the corridor outside the conference chamber. Chief, do you realize what you just did? You put Infinity under partial Council authority. Lasky is going to have to get permission from a bunch of civilizations we barely know before using his ship's weapons. That's a massive constraint on UNSC operational freedom. Yes, Chief replied. It is also the only option that prevented the coalition from fragmenting within weeks of the war's end. Captain Lasky understood that. Infinity's weapons are powerful, but they are useless if every civilization in Pegasus views them as a threat rather than a protection. You're thinking long-term, Shepard observed. Most soldiers I know focus on the immediate tactical situation. You're playing a strategic game that spans years. Spartans are trained to think in campaigns, not just battles. Chief explained. Winning today's fight is meaningless if it creates conditions that cause you to lose tomorrow's. The Retrovirus deployment eliminated the Wraith threat, but it created new problems. The Council framework is how we manage those problems before they become the next existential crisis. McKay joined them, looking equal parts impressed and exhausted. I've been running more detailed projections on the Council framework. If it works big, if Pegasus could develop faster than any galaxy in recorded history. You're talking about sharing. UNSC industrial technology with civilizations that still use primarily pre-industrial agriculture. The economic transformation would be unprecedented. And if it doesn't work? Shepard asked. Then we get an arms race as every civilization tries to develop the deadliest weapons using the technology we just gave them, McKay replied bluntly. But honestly, that was happening anyway. At least this way we have some oversight and safety protocols. Ronan had been listening from nearby, his particle magnum resting against his shoulder as always. On Satata, we had a saying, the weapon you give your enemy today may kill you tomorrow. You're betting that these civilizations will use UNSC and ancient technology for cooperation instead of conquest. That's optimistic. It's necessary, Chief corrected. Optimism would be believing everyone will cooperate, because it's the right thing to do. Necessity is recognizing that controlled technology sharing is less dangerous than uncontrolled proliferation. We're not hoping they'll cooperate. We're creating conditions where cooperation serves their self-interest better than conflict. Palmer approached from the armory section, still in full Mjolnir armor. Chief, got a minute? There's something you need to see. Chief followed her to a secured section of Atlantis where salvage teams had been cataloging technology recovered from dead ancient hive ships. Palmer led him to a containment chamber where a Wraith corpse lay on an examination table, but this wasn't an ancient Wraith. The biological markers identified it as a modern variant. What am I looking at? Chief asked. Remember how McKay said the retrovirus would kill 99.7% of Wraith? Palmer replied. This is the 0.3%. We found her in the debris field from one of Queen Seraph's hives. She survived the retrovirus. Chief studied the Wraith more carefully. The creature was alive but damaged. Its feeding hand showed necrotic tissue. Its regeneration was clearly impaired, and sensor scans indicated significant neurological damage. But it was alive, conscious, and watching them with eyes that held intelligence despite the biological catastrophe the retrovirus had inflicted. Can she feed? Chief asked. No, came McKay's voice as the scientist entered the containment chamber. The retrovirus destroyed the enzyme that regulates the feeding mechanism. She's Wraith without the ability to drain life force. She can't feed, can't regenerate properly, and her telepathic abilities are severely compromised. She's effectively neutralized as a threat. The Wraith spoke, her voice weak and distorted but comprehensible. You created a plague, killed my species, my Queen Seraph fought beside you, honored the Alliance. You repaid her with genocide. Chief felt the accusation like a physical blow. This Wraith had survived the weapon he'd deployed, lived through the extinction of her entire species, and now existed as a living reminder of the cost of Chief's tactical decisions. What's her name? Chief asked McKay quietly. She won't tell us. Says her name died with her queen. Chief approached the containment field, meeting the Wraith's damaged eyes directly. I deployed the retrovirus. I killed Queen Seraph and your people. You have a right to hate me. Hate? The Wraith's laugh was bitter and broken. I am beyond hate, warrior. I am the last. The final remnant of a species that existed for millions of years. My queen died trusting you to spare her people. Instead, you killed us all. She paused, struggling with damaged biology. Why? Why betray the Alliance? Because the alternative was allowing the ancient fleet to kill billions of humans, Chief replied honestly. The retrovirus was supposed to spare Modern Wraith. The spread exceeded projections. Your people's deaths were not intended, but they were an accepted risk when I deployed the weapon. Accepted risk, the Wraith repeated. 35,000 lives. Accepted risk. Her damaged feeding hand twitched. I cannot feed anymore. Cannot regenerate. Cannot connect to the collective consciousness that defined what it meant to be Wraith. You did not kill me, warrior. You made me into something worse than dead alive but no longer truly Wraith. Palmer spoke quietly from beside Chief. Dr. Glassman thinks he might be able to develop a treatment. Repair some of the neurological damage. Restore partial regeneration capability. She'd never be fully Wraith again, but she could survive without constant medical intervention. Why? The Wraith asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. Why would you help me after exterminating my species? Chief didn't have a good answer for that. Helping it didn't undo the genocide, didn't absolve the moral weight of the retrovirus deployment, didn't change the fundamental reality that he'd killed 35,000 allies to save billions of humans. But maybe that was exactly why it mattered. Because you survived, Chief said finally. Because you re the last living reminder of what the modern Wraith chose to become allies instead of predators, partners instead of parasites. Queen Seraph's legacy deserves to survive, even if only in the memories and testimony of a single warrior. The Wraith was silent for a long moment. Then, if you treat my damage, restore me enough to function. What then? I am the last Wraith in Pegasus Galaxy. The final representative of a dead species. What purpose would I serve? Testimony, Chief replied. When the Pegasus Council meets and discusses the war against the ancient Wraith, you can tell them what Queen Seraph's alliance meant, what the modern Wraith sacrificed. Ensure that history remembers your people as more than just the enemy humanity defeated. You want me to be a memorial, a living monument to genocide. I want you to ensure that your Queen's choice to ally with humanity was unforgotten, Chief corrected. That's not much, but it's better than dying alone in a containment chamber as the last of a species that nobody remembers fondly. The Wraith studied him with damaged but still intelligent eyes. Finally she spoke. Very well, Master Chief. I will accept your treatment. I will serve as witness to my species' end. And I will make certain that when Pegasus remembers the Wraith, they remember Queen Seraph's alliance as well as the culling that preceded it. She paused. But know this, every day I live will be a reminder of what you did. What you became to save this galaxy. You carry that weight, warrior, for as long as I survive to witness it. Understood, Chief replied, because what else could he say? He left the containment chamber with Palmer following. Once they were in the corridor, she spoke quietly. Chief, was that mercy or cruelty? Keeping her alive to be a living reminder of the retrovirus deployment? I don't know, Chief admitted. Maybe both. But she deserves the choice to survive, even if survival means carrying weight almost as heavy as what I'm carrying. The weight of genocide. The weight of necessary genocide, Chief corrected. There's a difference even if it doesn't feel like one. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 walked through Atlantis' corridors toward his quarters, past personnel celebrating victory, past Spartans preparing for the next deployment, past civilians who'd been saved from the ancient Wraith threat. He saw a hero, a savior who'd led the strike team that deployed the weapon that ended the war. Chief saw a soldier who decommitted genocide against allies and was trying to build something worth that terrible cost. History would judge which perspective was accurate. Chief just had to live long enough to see that judgment rendered. 3 months after the retrovirus deployment, the first Pegasus Council convened in Atlantis' Grand Hall, a chamber that the ancients had designed for exactly this purpose 10,000 years ago. Chief stood at parade rest in his Mjolnir armor near the entrance, watching representatives from 18 civilizations gather around a circular table that symbolized the equal partnership they were attempting to build. The Genii Confederation sent Chief Laden Radim, a pragmatic military leader who'd seized power through a coup and held it through competence. The travelers were represented by Katana Labria, whose generational ships had survived millennia by avoiding permanent alliances. A dozen agricultural worlds sent delegates who viewed this entire enterprise with cautious optimism mixed with deep skepticism. And at the table's center, Colonel Shepard sat Taylor, representing Atlantis' interests, while Captain Lasky's hologram represented the UNSC. The final seat remained conspicuously empty, a memorial to Queen Seraph and the modern Wraith who died as allies. The surviving Wraith warrior, who'd taken the name Memory at Chief's suggestion, stood beside that empty chair as witness to her species' extinction. The first Pegasus Council is now in session, Shepard announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood they were making history. We've gathered to formalize the framework for cooperation, establish technology-sharing protocols, and address the immediate reconstruction challenges facing our civilizations. But first, he gestured to Memory. Our witness has requested permission to speak. Memory moved to the center of the chamber with the careful movements of someone still adapting to a body that no longer worked as biology intended. Glassman's treatments had restored partial regeneration and stabilized her neurological damage, but she would never be truly Wraith again. She was something new, a survivor of genocide who'd been transformed by the very weapon that killed her people. "I speak for the dead," Memory began, her voice carrying harmonics that were distorted echoes of proper Wraith telepathy. 35,000 of my kind perished in the Retrovirus deployment. Warriors who fought beside your forces. Sanders who shared biological knowledge. Queens who chose alliance over ancestral feeding patterns. She paused, her damaged eyes scanning the assembled representatives. The modern Wraith were not innocent. We fed on humans for millennia. Caused suffering that cannot be quantified. But in the final years, we chose to become something different. Queen Seraph led that transformation, partnered with humanity despite our nature, and died because that partnership made her vulnerable to a weapon deployed by those she trusted. The chamber fell silent. Some representatives looked uncomfortable, forced to confront the moral complexity of celebrating victory won through genocidal means. Others showed calculation, clearly wondering how Memory's testimony would affect political dynamics. "I do not ask for apology," Memory continued. "The Master Chief made his tactical choice. Killed my species to save yours. The mathematics supported his decision: 35,000 Wraith versus 4.7 billion humans. By any objective standard, he chose correctly." Her voice hardened slightly. "But I asked that this council remember the cost. Remember that victory required betraying allies. Remember that the framework you build today stands on the graves of beings who trusted humanity enough to die beside them." Chief watched the representatives process Memory's words. She'd crafted her testimony carefully, acknowledging the tactical necessity while ensuring nobody forgot the moral weight. It was exactly what he'd hoped she'd do. "The witness's testimony is acknowledged," Shepard said formally. "Her words will be entered into the Council's permanent record, and the empty seat remains as memorial to Queen Seraph and the Modern Wraith Alliance." He paused. "Now we have practical matters to address. The ancient Wraith's extinction has created a power vacuum across 3/4 of Pegasus. Former feeding territories contain resources, technology, and populations that need governance. How do we manage this expansion without triggering territorial conflicts?" What followed was 6 hours of intensive negotiation that tested Chief's patience for diplomatic process. The Genii wanted mineral rights to former Wraith territories. The travelers claimed salvage priority on dead hive technology. Agricultural worlds demanded protection guarantees before committing resources to council projects. And underlying everything was the fundamental question: could civilizations that had never cooperated willingly actually build stable governance together? By the session's 4th hour, Chief recognized a pattern emerging. Representatives weren't arguing about principles, they were testing boundaries, establishing where other civilizations would push back, learning the political landscape's contours. It was the same dynamic he'd observed in UNSC coalition negotiations during the Covenant War. Former enemies learning to work together through controlled conflict rather than destructive warfare. "Proposal?" McKay interjected during a particularly heated debate about technology access. "We establish a tiered system. Tier 1 technology, basic manufacturing, agricultural improvements, medical advances available to all council members immediately. Tier 2 advanced materials science, energy generation, defensive systems available after demonstrating stable governance and resource management. Tier 3 weapons systems, ancient technology, UNSC military hardware, requires unanimous council approval and ongoing monitoring." Who determines stable governance? Leighton Radim challenged immediately. Atlantis? The UNSC? Or do we allow civilizations to police each other's internal politics? Third-party assessment, Taylor suggested diplomatically. Representatives from civilizations without direct stake in the evaluation. Rotational assignment to prevent favoritism. Transparent criteria established collectively rather than imposed unilaterally. The debate continued, but Chief noticed the representatives were actually building something functional. Not perfect, plenty of loopholes and potential conflicts remained, but workable enough to prevent immediate collapse into territorial warfare. During a break in the session, Captain Lasky's hologram approached Chief in one of the side chambers. Chief, I need to discuss something that can't wait for proper channels. The engineering teams analyzing ancient Wraith hyperspace components have made breakthrough progress. We can repair Infinity's slipspace drive. Full functionality, including dimensional transition capability. We could go home. Chief felt something twist in his chest. Home. The UNSC. Earth. The universe they'd left behind when the slipspace accident brought them to Pegasus. After 9 months in this galaxy, the possibility of return seemed both impossibly distant and suddenly tangible. Timeline? Chief asked. 3 to 4 months for complete repairs and integration. Testing would add another month. Call it 6 months total before we could attempt dimensional transition back to our universe. Lasky paused. But there's a complication. The Pegasus Council. We just convinced them that Infinity would remain as cooperative partner, not temporary visitor. If we announce plans to leave, the framework collapses. Chief finished. Civilizations won't commit to long-term cooperation if they believe the coalition's primary military asset is departing. The Genii will accelerate their own weapons development. The agricultural worlds will seek protection from other sources. Everything we've built falls apart. Exactly, Lasky confirmed. So, I'm faced with a choice. Be honest about our repair progress, and risk destabilizing Pegasus governance or keep it classified and continue operating under false pretenses. Neither option is ideal. Chief considered the tactical problem with Spartan analytical precision. The crew's morale would improve knowing return was possible. 9 months of believing they were permanently stranded had created psychological stress that affected operational efficiency. But announcing return plans would undermine the Council foundation and potentially trigger the exact territorial conflicts they were trying to prevent. Captain, what's Infinity Crew's current sentiment about staying versus returning? Chief asked. Lasky pulled up survey data on his tactical pad, split almost evenly. 47% want to return to Earth, family, their original lives. 41% have adapted to Pegasus and prefer staying to continue the mission here. 12% are undecided. He paused. The Spartan contingent is overwhelmingly in favor of staying. They've found purpose in this galaxy that many of them lacked back home. But the civilian specialists and support crew, they have families, Chief. Children growing up without parents. Spouses wondering if their loved ones are dead. Chief understood that weight intimately. He'd spent 30 years making decisions that separated people from their families, that asked soldiers to sacrifice personal happiness for mission necessity. But he'd never had to choose between condemning 17,000 people to permanent exile versus destabilizing an entire galaxy's fragile peace. Recommendation, Chief said finally. Continue repair work classified at highest security level. Limit knowledge to senior command staff only. Don't announce return capability until Pegasus Council has demonstrated at least 12 months of stable operation. By then, we'll know whether the framework can sustain itself without Infinity's guaranteed presence. That's asking the crew to live a lie for a year, Lasky said quietly. Asking them to commit to Pegasus partnerships while keeping the exit route secret. Yes, Chief acknowledged. It's also giving the Council time to build self-sufficiency before losing its primary defensive asset. If we're going to leave, and we should leave eventually, this isn't our galaxy. We need to ensure our departure doesn't cause collapse. That requires patience and operational security. Lasky was silent for a long moment. Then, agreed. Repair work continues on classified basis. Senior staff only. We'll revisit the decision in 12 months. He met Chief's gaze directly. But Chief, if the Council hasn't stabilized by then, how long are we obligated to stay? 2 years? 5? A generation? Where's the line between responsible partnership and permanent entrapment? I don't know, sir, Chief admitted. But I know that leaving before they re-ready would make everything we've done, including the Retrovirus deployment, meaningless. We can't save a galaxy and then abandon it to chaos because going home became convenient. Even if staying means our crew never sees their families again? Chief thought about the question that had no good answer. Thought about the 17,000 UNSC personnel who'd voted to stay and fight 9 months ago, not knowing that choice might become permanent. Thought about children on Earth growing up believing their parents died in a slipspace accident. Command means making choices that don't have good options, Captain. You taught me that. Sometimes the mission requires sacrifices that feel unbearable. The question is whether those sacrifices serve a purpose worth the cost. Lasky nodded slowly. Then we stay. For now. And we make damn sure that when we finally leave, Pegasus is stable enough to survive without us. The council session resumed with Chief returning to his observation position. Over the next 2 hours, the representatives hammered out agreements on resource allocation, technology access tiers, and dispute resolution mechanisms. It wasn't elegant, compromises rarely were, but it was functional. As the session concluded, Shepard made a final announcement. The Council's first decision is recorded. We've established framework for cooperation, created pathways for technology sharing, and built mechanisms for managing conflicts without warfare. This is historic, everyone. The first time in Pegasus history that human civilizations have chosen coordination over competition. Don't celebrate too early, Colonel, Leadenrathan cautioned. Frameworks look good on paper. Implementation is where they succeed or fail. Give us a year. Then we'll know if this council is visionary governance or elaborate theater. Then we make it succeed, Taylor replied with quiet determination. Because the alternative, returning to isolated competition while former Wraith territories become contested battlegrounds, serves nobody's interests. The representatives departed with varying degrees of optimism, leaving Chief alone with Shepard and Memory in the Grand Hall. Do you think it'll work? Shepard asked. The council, the cooperation, the whole framework? Yes, Memory answered before Chief could respond. The Wraith moved to Queen Seraph's empty memorial chair, her damaged hand resting on its surface. Because the alternative is rebuilding the exact conditions that made the Wraith necessary. Isolated human worlds unable to defend themselves, easy prey for any predator that evolves or arrives. Your council is an attempt to ensure that even if new threats emerge, humanity faces them united rather than fractured. And if new threats don't emerge, Shepard pressed. If Pegasus enjoys actual peace, then what? Does the council become obsolete? Or does it find new problems to justify its existence? That's a question for future generations, Chief said. Our mission is establishing foundation. Whether they build something worthwhile on that foundation is their responsibility. He left Atlantis' Grand Hall and walked to the city's edge, where the Lantean Ocean stretched to the horizon under an alien sun. 9 months ago, he'd arrived in this galaxy by accident, stranded far from home with a crew that had no idea whether they'd ever return. Now they had the capability to go home. And Chief was arguing for staying. The irony wasn't lost on him. But Spartans didn't measure success by personal comfort or convenient outcomes. They measured it by mission accomplishment and lives saved. And the mission in Pegasus, building stable governance that could survive humanity's eventual departure, was far from complete. So Chief would stay, would help build the framework, would ensure that when Infinity finally left, it left behind something sustainable rather than inevitable collapse. Because that's what Spartans did. They completed the mission, regardless of personal cost. Even when the mission meant potentially never going home. Even when the mission required living with the weight of genocide committed in humanity's name. Even when the mission offered no redemption, only the cold comfort that billions of people lived because he'd been willing to become a monster. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 watched the Lantean sunset and prepared for the next phase of the operation, building a peace worth the terrible cost of achieving it. The battle was over. The real war, the one for Pegasus's future, was just beginning. 14 months after the Retrovirus deployment, Chief stood on Infinity's bridge watching a Wraith dart approach through the view screen, not with weapons hot, but broadcasting peaceful intent on frequencies that made every instinct scream warnings about impossible situations. The dart settled in Infinity's main hangar, and Chief moved to meet it with a security detail that included Palmer and a full Spartan fire team. Whatever was about to happen, he'd face it ready for combat if negotiations failed. The dart's organic hull peeled open, and a single Wraith emerged. She was young by Wraith standards, perhaps only centuries old rather than millennia. Her white hair was shorter than Queen Seraph's had been, and her feeding hand showed none of the elaborate organic filigree that marked ancient lineages. But her eyes carried intelligence that made Chief's tactical assessment immediately escalate the threat level. "I am called Whisper," the Wraith said, her telepathic harmonics perfectly controlled, despite speaking to species she'd been engineered to view as food. "I come from beyond Pegasus, from a Wraith hive that departed this galaxy 3,000 years ago to establish feeding territories in distant reaches. We received the telepathic scream when the Retrovirus killed every Wraith in Pegasus. Felt our entire species die across the collective consciousness." She paused, her ancient eyes meeting Chief's visor. "I come seeking understanding, and perhaps alliance." The bridge fell into shocked silence. McKay broke it first, his voice climbing toward panic. "There are more Wraith outside Pegasus?" "The Retrovirus didn't kill all of them. The Retrovirus killed all Wraith connected to the Pegasus telepathic network," Whisper corrected. "But my hive departed before the ancient queens established their collective consciousness. We maintained minimal telepathic contact, enough to know our species faced extinction, but not enough to transmit the pathogen. We survived because we were separate." Chief processed this information with Spartan efficiency. The Retrovirus had killed every Wraith in Pegasus by exploiting the telepathic network. But Wraith hives that had left the galaxy millennia ago, that maintained only distant connection to the collective consciousness, would have survived. The genocide he'd committed wasn't total. The Wraith species continued to exist beyond Pegasus's borders. "How many hives?" Captain Lasky demanded from his command chair. "3, Whisper replied. "Perhaps 15,000 Wraith total. The last remnant of a species that once numbered in the millions. We watched our entire civilization die, felt the Retrovirus tear through our collective memory, and now face a choice: return to Pegasus seeking vengeance, or seek understanding of what drove humanity to deploy such a weapon." "You chose understanding?" Palmer asked skeptically. "Forgive me if I find that hard to believe. Your entire species was exterminated by a biological weapon. Most civilizations would respond with retaliation, not diplomatic outreach. Most civilizations have not spent 3,000 years learning to survive without feeding," Whisper replied. And there was something in her voice that suggested depths Chief hadn't anticipated. "My ancestors departed Pegasus because they believed the culling cycles were unsustainable. That eventually Wraith would consume all available humans and face extinction through resource depletion. We sought alternative feeding grounds, found them, and learned to adapt." She raised her feeding hand and Chief's team tensed. But Whisper didn't extend it toward them. She displayed it, showing organic modifications that looked deliberately engineered. "We developed technology that supplements feeding, allows us to sustain ourselves on minimal life force extraction without killing the host. It is not perfect. We still require some feeding, but we no longer drain humans to desiccated corpses. One human can sustain a Wraith for months rather than being consumed in minutes." McKay was scanning her with every instrument available. "She's telling the truth. Her biology shows significant modification from standard Wraith physiology. The feeding mechanism has been deliberately altered to reduce efficiency but increase sustainability. This is..." He paused, clearly struggling with implications. "This is exactly what the modern Wraith were attempting when we killed them. Evolutionary adaptation away from destructive feeding patterns." Memory moved forward from her position near the entrance, the surviving modern Wraith studying this newcomer with an expression Chief couldn't quite read. "You left Pegasus seeking survival through adaptation." "We stayed and attempted the same evolution. But we moved too slowly, trusted the alliance with humans before completing our biological transformation, and died because of that trust." "I know," Whisper replied, her telepathic harmonics carrying genuine grief. "I felt Queen Seraph's final moments through our distant connection. Felt her realization that the Retrovirus was killing modern hives alongside ancient ones. Her last thought was regret that she could not complete what my ancestors began 3,000 years ago." She turned to Chief. "You deployed the weapon. You killed Queen Seraph and 35,000 Wraith who allied with you. By any measure, my people have justification for vengeance. We could return with our 3 hives, attack Pegasus settlements, make humanity suffer as we suffered. But you won't, Chief said, reading the tactical situation with certainty born from 3 decades of warfare. Because vengeance doesn't resurrect the dead, it just creates more corpses. And a species reduced to 3 hives can't afford to waste lives on retribution that serves no strategic purpose. Whisper's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. You understand, good. Then perhaps we can discuss alliance rather than warfare. Alliance, Shepard repeated, having joined the gathering on Infinity's bridge. With Wraith, again, because the first alliance worked out so well for your species. It worked out well for humanity. Whisper countered. 4.7 billion humans live because of Queen Seraph as alliance and the Master Chief as ruthless tactical calculus. My people died, yes. But the alternative, allowing the ancient queens to consume Pegasus, would have been worse. Sometimes survival requires accepting terrible costs. She was using Chief's own logic against him. It was effective and deeply uncomfortable. What exactly are you proposing? Lasky asked carefully. Formal alliance between my 3 hives and the Pegasus Council, Whisper explained. We provide biological technology, organic engineering knowledge, and advanced hyperspace capabilities that your civilizations lack. In exchange, we request territories where we can establish sustainable feeding populations, humans who voluntarily provide minimal life force in exchange for Wraith protection, technology, and mutual benefit. Absolutely not, Palmer said immediately. We're not creating human cattle farms just because you've learned to drain people slower. Not cattle farms, Whisper replied patiently. Symbiotic populations. Humans who understand the exchange minimal feeding that doesn't significantly impact their lifespan in return for Wraith defensive capabilities, medical technology, and access to biological enhancements. Voluntary participation. Regulated by council oversight. Transparent rather than predatory. Chief watched Memory's reaction carefully. The surviving Modern Wraith was listening with an intensity that suggested this conversation mattered deeply to her. Finally, she spoke. This is what Queen Seraph envisioned. What the Modern Wraith were attempting to achieve before the Retrovirus killed us. Coexistence based on mutual benefit rather than parasitic predation. But, she paused. Can it actually work? Can Wraiths sustain themselves through regulated minimal feeding without eventually reverting to culling patterns? My hive has done so for 3,000 years, Whisper replied. It requires constant discipline, technological supplementation, and acceptance that we will never achieve the population numbers our species once commanded. We sustain approximately 5,000 Wraith per hive through careful management and supplemental feeding technology. It is survival, but not the dominance our species once enjoyed. What guarantee do we have that you won't just establish territories and then resume culling? McKay demanded. Forgive my skepticism, but trusting Wraith hasn't worked out well historically. Whisper gestured to her dart. I came alone to the heart of the coalition that destroyed my species. If I intended deception or eventual betrayal, this would be suicidal. My 3 hives contain the last 15,000 Wraith in existence. We cannot afford to waste lives on duplicitous schemes. We need genuine alliance or we face extinction within generations. Chief ran the tactical mathematics. 15,000 Wraith, offering advanced biological technology and hyperspace knowledge in exchange for territories and regulated feeding agreements. The benefits were significant. Wraith organic engineering could revolutionize Pegasus medical science and manufacturing. The risks were equally significant. What happened if regulated feeding failed? If Wraith populations grew beyond sustainable levels? If future generations decided culling was easier than maintaining difficult alliances? This decision isn't mine to make, Chief said. It requires Pegasus Council approval. Full transparency, open debate, and consensus-based agreement. If the Council rejects your proposal, will you accept that decision peacefully? Yes, Whisper replied without hesitation, because the alternative, forcing our presence through military action, would be the exact predatory behavior we agree, claiming to have evolved beyond. If Pegasus humanity refuses alliance, my hives will seek territories elsewhere in the universe. We will survive. But we would prefer to survive here, in the galaxy that birthed our species, helping to build what Queen Seraph died attempting to create. Memory moved beside Whisper, the two Wraith, one the last survivor of Pegasus's modern hives, one representing the distant remnant of an ancient diaspora facing the coalition command staff together. "I support presenting this proposal to the Council," Memory said. "Not because I've forgiven the Retrovirus deployment, but because Queen Seraph's vision deserves the chance to succeed, even if she didn't live to see it." Shepard looked at Chief, clearly asking for tactical assessment. Chief considered every angle, every potential failure mode, every historical precedent that suggested trusting Wraith was strategic suicide. Then he thought about Queen Seraph's final request, that her people's sacrifice be remembered as more than just collateral damage, that the modern Wraith's attempt to evolve beyond predation be honored even in death. "Present the proposal to the Council," Chief said. "Full transparency about the risks. Complete disclosure of feeding requirements and sustainability projections. Council vote required for approval, with monitoring protocols and immediate alliance termination clauses if feeding regulations are violated." But he met Whisper's ancient eyes directly. "If the Council approves and your hives betray that trust, I will personally ensure that your 3 hives suffer the same fate as the 217 ancient vessels. Are we clear?" "Perfectly clear, Master Chief," Whisper replied. "My species has already learned the cost of underestimating your tactical ruthlessness. We will not make that mistake again." The Pegasus Council convened in emergency session 6 hours later. Chief watched from his usual position as Whisper presented her proposal with the diplomatic skill of someone who understood she was negotiating for her species' survival. Memory stood beside her, offering testimony about Queen Seraph's vision and the modern Wraith's attempted evolution. The debate for 14 hours. Representatives argued about feeding ethics, sustainability projections, monitoring mechanisms, and whether any alliance with Wraith could ever be truly safe. The Genii were opposed on principle, too much history of Wraith culling to ever trust cooperation. The agricultural worlds were cautiously open. They'd seen what the Retrovirus cost and were uneager to repeat Genocide. The travelers remained neutral, waiting to see which direction consensus would shift. Finally, Shepard called for a vote. All those in favor of conditional alliance with Whisper's hives, subject to strict feeding regulations and council monitoring, indicate support. The vote was close, 10 in favor, 7 opposed, 1 abstention. Barely a majority, but enough under council rules to establish provisional alliance pending successful implementation of feeding protocols. "The motion carries," Shepard announced. Whisper's 3 hives are granted territories in former Wraith feeding grounds, subject to the following conditions. He listed 17 different regulatory requirements, monitoring protocols, and immediate termination clauses. Whisper accepted every condition without negotiation. The alliance is agreed. "My people will prove that Wraith can evolve beyond predation, that coexistence is possible. And we will honor Queen Seraph's memory by succeeding where she was not permitted to try." As the council session concluded, Chief found himself standing beside Memory, watching Whisper's dart depart through Atlantis' bay. "Do you think it will work?" Memory asked quietly. "Can Wraith truly change their nature?" "I don't know," Chief admitted. "But I know that refusing to try because of historical precedent is how species become locked in endless cycles of warfare. If there's even a small chance that Wraith can evolve into something other than humanity's predators, it's worth the risk, even after what the Retrovirus cost. After killing 35,000 Wraith who are attempting exactly this evolution." "Especially after that," Chief replied. "If Whisper's hives succeed, it proves that what Queen Seraph and the modern Wraith were attempting was possible. That their deaths weren't meaningless sacrifice, but investment in a future they wouldn't live to see. It doesn't absolve the genocide, but it gives it purpose beyond pure tactical necessity." Memory was silent for a long moment. Then Queen Seraph would have appreciated the irony. She died from a weapon deployed by her allies, and now her vision might be realized by Wraith, who survived precisely because they were distant from the alliance she built. The universe has a cruel sense of narrative symmetry. "The universe doesn't care about narrative," Chief said. "Only outcomes. And the outcome is that Pegasus has a chance at peace that includes Wraith evolution rather than extinction. Whether that chance succeeds or fails, that's for future generations to determine." He left Atlantis' bay and returned to Infinity, where Captain Lasky was waiting with news the Chief had been anticipating for 14 months. The slipspace drive is fully repaired, Lasky said without preamble. Integration with Wraith hyperspace components is complete. Engineering estimates 94% probability of successful dimensional transition back to our universe. We can go home, Chief. The question is, should we? Chief looked at the tactical display showing Pegasus Galaxy, the territories being rebuilt. The Council framework stabilizing, the fragile peace held together by cooperation and mutual self-interest rather than external threats. 14 months of work. Thousands of lives spent building something that might collapse if Infinity departed too soon. Captain, what's the crew's sentiment now? Chief asked. Lasky pulled up updated survey data. 38% want to return home immediately. 47% prefer staying to continue the mission. 15% undecided. He paused. The numbers have shifted, Chief. More personnel have adapted to Pegasus than want to leave. They've built lives here, relationships, purpose that they lacked back home. And the ones who want to leave? Mostly support staff with families on Earth. People who joined the UNSC for careers, not crusades. They've done their duty, but they want to go home. Chief understood that tension intimately. Duty versus personal desire. Mission versus family. The eternal conflict of military service crystallized into one impossible choice. My recommendation, Chief said carefully, is that we present the crew with a transparent choice. Full disclosure that slipspace repairs are complete and return is possible. Then allow personnel to vote. Stay in Pegasus to continue stabilization efforts, or return to our universe and Earth. Majority decision determines Infinity's course. That's democratic, Lasky observed. Also risky. If the vote is close, we'll split the crew. And if the majority chooses to return, then we've done everything we can for Pegasus and we go home with a clear conscience, Chief completed. But if they choose to stay, it's because they believe the mission here matters more than personal comfort. Either way, the crew deserves the choice. Lasky nodded slowly. Agreed. I'll schedule the vote for next week. Give people time to consider the implications fully. He paused. Chief, if the vote is to return, are you coming with us? The question hit Chief with unexpected force. Was he? He'd spent 14 months building Pegasus' stability, carrying the weight of the Retrovirus deployment, trying to create something worth the terrible cost. Going home meant leaving that work unfinished. But staying meant potentially never seeing Earth again, never returning to the UNSC that had forged him into what he was. I'll honor the crew's decision, Chief said, which wasn't really an answer, but was the best he could offer. 1 week later, 17,000 UNSC personnel cast their votes in the most consequential decision Infinity's crew had ever faced. Stay in Pegasus Galaxy and continue the mission, or return home to Earth and the lives they'd left behind. The results came in after 6 hours of voting. Stay, 9,047 votes, 53.2%. Return, 7,341 votes, 43.2%. Abstain, 612 votes, 3.6%. Master Chief stood on Infinity's bridge watching the results display, knowing that the narrow majority had just committed 17,000 people to remaining in a galaxy far from home, continuing a mission that might take decades to complete. They'd voted to stay, to finish what they'd started, to ensure that Pegasus's fragile peace survived long enough to become stable governance. It was the right decision, the necessary decision. It was also the decision that meant most of these people would never see their families again. Chief looked at Captain Lasky, saw the weight of command settling across the officer's shoulders, and understood that this moment, more than the Retrovirus deployment, more than the battle against 217 ancient hives, was when they truly committed to Pegasus. Very well, Lasky said, his voice carrying across the bridge. The crew has spoken. Infinity remains in Pegasus Galaxy. Our mission continues. And we will ensure that when our grandchildren tell the story of how humanity survived the ancient Wraith and built lasting peace, they tell it with pride rather than shame. The bridge crew responded with determined acknowledgement, and Chief felt something shift, not resolution, never that, but acceptance that this galaxy was home now. that the mission wasn't temporary deployment but permanent commitment. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 had saved Pegasus through genocide and tactical ruthlessness. Now he would spend however long it took to make that salvation worth the cost. The final stand was over. The long war to build peace worth fighting for had only begun. 5 years after the Retrovirus deployment, Chief stood in the same Atlantis observation deck where he'd first watched Queen Seraph's hologram explain the ancient threat. The view hadn't changed. Lantea's oceans still stretched to an alien horizon. The city's spires still gleamed with ancient engineering that humanity was only beginning to understand. But everything else was different. Through the viewport, he could see the massive orbital construction platform where Pegasus's first jointly built starship was taking shape. Not a warship. The Council had voted against military vessels in favor of exploration and trade. The ship combined UNSC manufacturing techniques, ancient material science, and Wraith organic engineering into something that belonged to no single civilization but to Pegasus itself. Workers from a dozen worlds collaborated on its construction, and the betting pool suggested it would be operational within 8 months. "You know," Colonel Shepard said, joining Chief at the viewport, "when you first walked out of our Stargate in that armor, I gave you maybe 6 months before you'd find a way to leave. Figured you were too much the soldier to adapt to our particular brand of chaos." He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. "I was spectacularly wrong. Adaptation is what Spartans do," Chief replied, watching a Wraith-designed shuttle ferry supplies to the construction platform using the minimal feeding labor agreement that Whisper Jess Hives had pioneered. Survive, adapt, complete the mission. Pegasus was just another mission with different parameters. Was? Shepard caught the past tense. "Chief, you're talking like the mission's complete." Chief pulled up data on his HUD, displaying 5 years of metrics that painted Pegasus's transformation in stark numbers. 0 culling events since the Retrovirus deployment. 15 new worlds added to the Council framework through voluntary membership rather than conquest. Agricultural production up 340% through UNSC farming technology integration. Life expectancy increasing across protected worlds as ancient medical knowledge spread through the population. And perhaps most telling, 0 military conflicts between Council member civilizations in 18 months. "The immediate mission is complete," Chief clarified. "Pegasus is stable. The Council governs effectively enough that Infinity's presence is supplementary rather than critical. The framework we built can sustain itself without constant UNSC oversight." He paused, choosing words carefully. "Which means the next phase begins." "Next phase?" McKay's voice came from behind them as the scientist entered carrying a tablet that probably contained whatever new project had consumed his last 72 hours. "Please tell me you're not planning another galaxy-saving operation." "I've had quite enough of those, thank you." "Not galaxy-saving," Chief replied. "Galaxy-leaving. The slip space repairs are 5 years proven. Infinity can return to our universe with 97% confidence of successful transition. Captain Lasky is planning to present the option to the crew again. Now that Pegasus is stable, anyone who wants to return home can do so." The observation deck fell silent. After 5 years of commitment to Pegasus, the possibility of return felt simultaneously impossible and inevitable. "How many do you think will leave?" Shepard asked quietly. "Unknown," Chief admitted. 5 years changes people. Personnel have built lives here, relationships, families, purposes they didn't have in our universe. But some still dream of Earth, still have loved ones waiting who deserve to know they survived. He gestured to the construction platform. "The new starship will be operational in 8 months. If Infinity departs, Pegasus won't be defenseless." McKay was running calculations on his tablet with the manic intensity of someone who'd just been handed an equation that challenged fundamental assumptions. "The dimensional transition. Chief, you understand that attempting slip space jump between universes is phenomenally dangerous? The accident that brought you here was unique. Recreating it deliberately could tear Infinity apart at subatomic levels. Dr. Glassman's team has run simulations for 3 years. Chief replied. The integration of Wraith hyperspace components with UNSC slip-space generators created a hybrid drive capable of controlled dimensional transition. Risk exists, but it's manageable. Manageable, McKay repeated. You re-talking about punching a hole through the fabric between universes and hoping your ship doesn't get crushed by exotic physics we barely understand. That's not manageable risk. That's statistically probable catastrophic failure. Yet you're already calculating how to improve the process. Shepard observed, reading McKay's tablet over his shoulder. Those are optimization formulas for dimensional transition stability. McKay deflated slightly. Fine, yes. If the UNSC is insane enough to attempt this, I want to make sure they don't accidentally collapse both universes in the process. Professional pride, nothing more. Memory entered the observation deck. The surviving Wraith moving with the careful grace of someone who, spent 5 years learning to exist as a living memorial to her species' extinction. She'd become the Pegasus Council's official historian, documenting the transformation from Wraith-dominated feeding grounds to cooperative governance. Her testimony about Queen Seraph's vision had been integrated into council education programs, ensuring that future generations understood the cost of peace. I heard Infinity might be leaving, Memory said without preamble. After 5 years of commitment, you're considering abandonment? Not abandonment, Chief corrected gently. Transition. Infinity's crew has given Pegasus 5 years. Many have given their entire lives, knowing they'd never see Earth again. Those who choose to return deserve that opportunity. Those who choose to stay will continue the mission. And you? Memory asked, her damaged telepathic senses focusing on Chief with an intensity that suggested the question mattered deeply. Will the architect of my species' genocide stay to witness what his actions created or flee to avoid the reminder of what he became? The accusation was pointed, deliberate, and not entirely unfair. Chief had spent 5 years carrying the weight of 35,000 Wraith deaths. 5 years of watching Memory document Queen Seraph vision while knowing he'd killed the queen who trusted him. 5 years of building peace on the foundation of genocide. I don't know, Chief admitted honestly. Part of me wants to stay, to see Pegasus succeed, to ensure the retrovirus deployment served purpose beyond tactical necessity. Part of me, he paused, the words difficult even after 5 years of practice at emotional honesty. Part of me wants to escape the constant reminder of what I did. Return to a universe where I'm Master Chief the hero rather than Master Chief the genocidist. You're both, Memory said flatly. You saved 4.7 billion humans by killing 35,000 Wraith, hero and monster. Savior and betrayer. The universe doesn't care which label fits better, only which outcome mattered more. She moved to stand beside him at the viewport. But if you leave, who carries the memory? Who ensures that future generations understand the cost of the peace they inherited? You do, Chief replied. You're the official historian. Queen Seraph's witness. The voice that reminds the council that stability was purchased through terrible choices. I'm Wraith, Memory countered. My perspective is valuable but incomplete. Pegasus needs the human perspective too, needs the Master Chief to admit publicly that he deployed a genocidal weapon and would do it again under the same circumstances. That testimony matters, Chief. It prevents sanitized history where uncomfortable truths get edited away. Chief understood what she was asking. Not forgiveness. Memory had made clear she would never forgive the retrovirus deployment. But accountability. Witness. The refusal to let history forget that peace required choices that couldn't be morally justified. I'll make my testimony available, Chief said. Complete record of the retrovirus deployment, tactical decision-making and consequences. Classified details declassified for historical record. Whether I physically remain in Pegasus or return to my universe, the documentation will exist. Memory nodded slowly. That's acceptable, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that you understand the weight of what you did. Taylor joined them, her presence bringing diplomatic calm to the charged atmosphere. The Council is requesting your presence, Master Chief. Whisper's hives have proposed a significant modification to the feeding agreements, and the representatives want your assessment before voting. Chief followed Taylor to the Council chamber, where Whisper stood before the assembled representatives with the confidence of someone who spent 5 years proving that Wraith could honor agreements. Her 3 hives had maintained perfect compliance with feeding regulations, minimal life force extraction, voluntary human participants, transparent monitoring. 0 violations in 5 years. The proposal is simple, Whisper explained as Chief took his observation position. My hives have developed biological technology that could extend human lifespan by approximately 40% through controlled minimal feeding combined with Wraith regeneration factors. We offer this technology to council members in exchange for expanded territories and increased feeding populations. The chamber erupted into immediate debate. The potential benefits were enormous. 40% lifespan extension meant humans living to 110 to 120 years on average. But accepting required expanding Wraith feeding territories and increasing the number of humans who participated in minimal feeding exchanges. Chief watched the discussion unfold with professional detachment. This was exactly the kind of difficult choice that defined Pegasus' new reality cooperation, that required accepting uncomfortable compromises in exchange for significant benefits. No pure solutions, just pragmatic calculations about acceptable costs. The vote was closer than previous Wraith-related decisions had been, but ultimately passed, 12 in favor, 5 opposed, 1 abstention. Whisper's hives would receive expanded territories and feeding populations in exchange for sharing lifespan extension technology. After the session concluded, Chief found Captain Lasky waiting in one of the side chambers. The UNSC officer looked older than when they'd arrived in Pegasus. 5 years of command had added lines to his face and gray to his hair. But his eyes still carried the determination that had kept Infinity fighting when the ancient fleet arrived. Chief, I've made my decision about Infinity's future, Lasky said, without preamble. I'm presenting the crew with 3 options. Return to our universe aboard Infinity, remain in Pegasus aboard Infinity, or remain in Pegasus on permanent assignment to the Council. Those who choose option 3 will be released from UNSC service and become Pegasus citizens. How many are you expecting to choose each option? Chief asked. Honestly, I think we'll lose about 30% of the crew to option 1 people who've been dreaming of Earth for 5 years. Another 40% will choose option 2, remain with Infinity but stay in Pegasus. The final 30%, Lasky paused. They've gone native, Chief. Married locals, started families, built lives that have nothing to do with the UNSC anymore. They'll choose option 3 and stay as citizens. And you? Lasky smiled slightly. I'm the captain. I go where my ship goes. And Infinity's crew has voted to make Pegasus our permanent home. We'll maintain UNSC structure and protocols, but we're Pegasus's ship now, not Earth's. The weight of that decision settled across the chamber. Infinity, Earth's most powerful warship, built to defend humanity against Covenant remnants and new threats, was becoming Pegasus Galaxy's protector. A transition from temporary deployment to permanent commitment. When do you present the options to the crew? Chief asked. Tomorrow. Give them 2 weeks to decide. Then we execute whatever choice the majority makes. Lasky met Chief's gaze directly. What about you, Chief? You've spent 5 years building this galaxy's stability. You've earned the right to choose your own path. Return home to Earth and the UNSC. Stay with Infinity and Pegasus. Or integrate fully as a Pegasus citizen? Chief had been avoiding that question for 5 years. Avoiding the choice between duty to the UNSC that forged him and commitment to the galaxy he'd saved through monstrous means. Avoiding the decision that would define the rest of his existence. I'll honor the crew's majority decision, Chief said, which was still not quite an answer, but was the closest he could come to honest clarity. 2 weeks later, the results came in. Option 1. Return to Earth. 4,823 votes, 28.4%. Option 2. Stay with Infinity and Pegasus. 7,956 votes, 46.8%. Option 3. Become Pegasus citizens. 4,221 votes, 24.8%. Infinity would remain in Pegasus with approximately 12,000 crew, while nearly 5,000 personnel would return to Earth aboard specially modified transport vessels that Pegasus shipyards had constructed using hybrid technology. Another 4,000 would leave UNSC service entirely and integrate as citizens. Chief stood in Infinity's hangar bay watching the first transport vessel prepare for dimensional transition. Among the personnel departing were Spartans who'd fought beside him for 5 years, Marines who'd held impossible lines during the ancient Wraith assault, and civilians who'd simply wanted to go home. Commander Palmer approached in her Mjolnir armor, though she'd removed her helmet in a gesture of informality that 5 years in Pegasus had made acceptable. "I'm staying," she said without preamble. In case you were wondering, the Spartanives voted 62% to remain in Pegasus. Turns out we found purpose here that we lacked back home. And the others? Chief asked, watching personnel board the transport. Mostly support staff with families. People who did their duty but deserved to see their loved ones again. Palmer paused. "Chief, I know you haven't officially declared your choice yet, but if you're planning to leave, I want you to know that the Spartans who stay will honor what you built here. We'll continue the mission. Ensure Pegasus doesn't collapse just because its architect departed." Chief considered Palmer's words while watching the transport vessel seal its hatches. Considered the weight of 5 years' work, the burden of genocide that would never lift, the question of whether staying meant facing consequences or fleeing from them constituted the more honest choice. "I'm staying," Chief said, the decision crystallizing even as he spoke the words. "Not because I've forgiven myself for the retrovirus deployment. Not because Pegasus needs me specifically. But because memory was right, someone who made the terrible choices needs to stay and witness what those choices created. That's accountability." Palmer nodded slowly. "Accountability. That's very Spartan of you, Chief. We don't run from what we've done, even when staying hurts more than leaving." The transport vessel launched, beginning its journey toward the dimensional transition point that would carry it back to the UNSC, to Earth, to the universe they'd left behind 5 years ago. Chief watched it depart and felt something settle in his chest, not peace. Never that, but acceptance that Pegasus was home now. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 had spent 30 years defending humanity in one universe. He would spend however long remain defending humanity in this one. 3 months after the transport departed, Atlantis received confirmation. The vessel had successfully transitioned back to the UNSC's universe. 5,000 personnel had returned home safely, carrying with them the story of Infinity's 5 years in Pegasus and the decision to remain permanently. The message from Earth was brief. "Well done. Continue the mission. Humanity is proud." Chief read those words in his quarters aboard Infinity, surrounded by 5 years of accumulated mission reports, tactical analysis, and the documentation of every choice that had brought them to this moment. Humanity was proud of what? The genocide that saved billions? The framework that built peace? The commitment to stay when returning home became possible? Probably all of it. Probably none of it mattered compared to the simple reality. They'd survived. They'd adapted. They'd made impossible choices and carried the weight of consequences. He sealed the final report on the retrovirus deployment, complete tactical analysis, moral assessment, and acknowledgement that he would make the same decision again under identical circumstances, and transmitted it to Pegasus historical archives. Memory would ensure it was preserved alongside her own testimony about Queen Seraph, vision, and the Modern Wraith, extinction. Future generations would judge whether Master Chief had been hero or monster, whether saving 4.7 billion humans justified killing 35,000 allies, whether the peace they inherited was worth the terrible cost of achieving it. Chief didn't need to know that judgment. He just needed to ensure the questions got asked honestly. 5 years, 3 months, and 17 days after arriving in Pegasus Galaxy through a slipspace accident, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 stood on Atlantis, as high as spire, watching the sun set over an alien ocean in a galaxy that would never be fully home but was home enough. The ancient Wraith were extinct. The modern Wraith survived in modified form. Pegasus humanity built civilizations without fear of culling. And 17,000 UNSC personnel had chosen to remain, ensuring that the framework they'd created would endure. The mission wasn't complete. Peace required constant maintenance. Cooperation demanded ongoing effort, and the weight of genocide never lifted. But the mission was manageable now, sustainable. Something that could be passed to future generations rather than shouldered alone. Master Chief had spent 5 years saving Pegasus and building stability worth the terrible cost of achieving it. Now, he would spend however long remained ensuring that stability became something future generations could be proud of rather than ashamed by. It wasn't redemption. The retrovirus deployment would haunt him until his augmented biology finally failed. But it was purpose, and for a Spartan, purpose was enough. The sunset faded into alien stars, and Chief turned from the observation spire to rejoin his team. There were council meetings to attend, training exercises to supervise, and the constant work of maintaining peace in a galaxy that had known 10,000 years of predation. Spartans never retired, never stopped fighting, never laid down the burden of protecting humanity. They just found new battles to fight, new galaxies to defend, new reasons to prove that humanity's will to survive exceeded any threat's capacity to destroy. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 had fought for 35 years across 2 universes. He'd fight for 35 more if that's what the mission required. Because that's what Spartans did. And in Pegasus Galaxy, far from the Earth that forged him, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stay when leaving became possible, Chief had finally found the answer to the question that had haunted him since the Retrovirus deployment. Was saving billions worth becoming a monster? The answer was both yes and no. The question was flawed. Morality was complicated. But the mission was clear. Protect humanity. Build peace. Accept the weight. And never, ever stop fighting for a future worth the cost of achieving it. The historians of Pegasus would record the years following the ancient Wraith's extinction as the era of transformation, when human civilizations learned to cooperate rather than compete, when Wraith evolved beyond predation into symbiosis, when technology sharing created prosperity that 10,000 years of culling had prevented. They would remember the Pegasus Council as visionary governance, infinity as humanity's guardian, and the framework as proof that ancient enemies could build lasting peace. But the historians would also record the cost. 35,000 modern Wraith, extinct through retrovirus deployment. Queen Seraph's alliance, betrayed by the tactical necessity that killed her. Master Chief's testimony, preserved in archives as reminder that peace required choices that couldn't be morally justified. Memory ensured the full truth survived, both the triumph of survival and the weight of methods that made survival possible. Future generations would inherit Pegasus' stability and the uncomfortable knowledge that it was purchased through genocide, committed by those who claimed to be heroes. Whether that made Master Chief savior or monster remained contested for centuries. The debate never resolved. It wasn't supposed to. Some questions existed not to be answered, but to remind people that power demanded accountability, that victory required vigilance, and that the price of peace was eternal remembrance of what it cost to achieve. In the end, Chief had given Pegasus what he'd promised, a framework worth the terrible cost of building it. A future where billions lived because one Spartan had been willing to become whatever was necessary to protect them. The mission was complete. A weight remained forever. And Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 carried it willingly, knowing that some burdens were meant to be borne alone so that others could live unburdened.